All right, good evening, everyone. We are here tonight to receive the budgets from the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education and ask preliminary questions. This is just the beginning of a process which will culminate in budgets being set to referendum likely in May. Public hearings will be held on April 8th and 21st at the Simsbury Public Library to receive further comments. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin our meeting with public audience. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Joan, if you could just come up to the dais, state your name and address.
I'll start it off.
Thank you.
Joan Coe. Over the years, the Board of Education's budget has increased with the inclusion of special education. When the state mandated that all schools must include all students in the classrooms, taxes to support these services increased. With that mandate came special education. There was no need for additional staff to meet the needs of each child under this inclusion policy. As the needs grew, so did the additional staff to supply the services needed to accomplish that task. Many students with emotional needs were disruptive in a class setting and needed special services within the school building outside the classroom. Costs started to escalate as other outside agencies and services were needed to address the issues. Unregulated cost containment added to the increase. Special education has become special services that should be regulated and maintained by the state, not the schools. Schools are not equipped to deal with mental illness. Tax dollars should be used for education, not special individualized services. The mandate for inclusion initiated this progression of services. Another mandate can remove it from inclusion in education. The Simsbury Board of Education budget reflects about 50 paraeducators, social workers, occupational therapists, psychologists, New Path social worker, director of equity and access, special education tutor, supervisors, and others. These services require additional staff at taxpayers' expense that should be decreased. School superintendents from each town should lobby the governor to remove mandates for special education and develop programs to service the children with special needs at the state level and transfer the cost to the state. The school should not be a social service organization, but should use the tax dollars to provide quality education for the students where they can learn in a safe and nourishing environment. Teachers should be educators, providing quality education to the students, not wrapped up in all the ancillary activities that are now mandated. I provided the link to the faculty and staff directory for your review. These changes will take time, but we must start deregulating mandates as they become a burden to the taxpayer. To cut costs, the Board of Education should start redistricting, with the 6th grade incorporated at the Henry James Junior High, grades K to 2 in 2 schools and grades 3 to 5 in 2 schools, leaving 1 school vacant, lowering overhead costs. It is time to think out of the box and address the challenges we all will face in the future. I'm done. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch and Twitter at Joan Coe. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joan. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public audience? Lori. Just Lori for our clerk, if you could give your full name and address.
Give my name, it's Lori Boyko. Everybody in town knows where I live. I just have a couple of quick comments.
Our clerk will actually have to look it up, so it would just be helpful to have.
That's fine, I'm not gonna do it on TV. I just have a couple of quick comments, and shockingly, they're not about the Board of Ed. At the Board of Selectmen approval of the budget, they increased, I think, $170,000, the town manager's proposed budget, which came in under your guidance, on the expenditure side specifically. And some of the ways they did that were adding back in expenses that the town manager had reduced in the budget, including $50,000 for Main Street and a huge allocation for the ambulance. And I think if they're going to increase those items back into the budget that the town manager had reduced, then they need to really go back and find some other reductions to offset that. Some of what they did was reduce the legal fees that were estimated in the budget, but those aren't really reductions because the legal fees are what the legal fees are. You can't just all of a sudden not spend that money on legal fees. Similarly, they increased some projected revenues, which is fine, but in town government, revenues don't really increase. You're not going to go out and increase revenues other than to ask for them from taxpayers. So using that to offset the increase in the Board of Selectmen's budget is really just smoke and mirrors, and they need to go back and find some other reductions. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public audience?
I'll speak.
Ally.
Hi, my name is Holly McGrath. I live at 2 Old Barge Road in Simsbury, and I serve on the Board of Trustees for the library. And I know you are expecting me to advocate for the library, and I care deeply about the library, so yes, I will do that. But I want people to know that I also share that for every single resident, not just as a member of the Board of Trustees. I've been talking to people about our strategic plan, which we have embarked on for the next 5 years. And we have a survey on the town website, and we're asking for community feedback. So I'm getting a lot of that, and what's coming home to me is how important the library is to every single resident, that it serves all ages from birth to end of life, and people rely on it, they depend on it, and I know that as you plan your dollars for the future, every dollar that you invest in the library pays off manyfold for every single resident. A lot of this is through efficient budgeting at the library, and that's thanks to our staff that are high performers and go above and beyond to welcome everyone, but also to use that money wisely. And the partnerships that come through, I think can't be understated or overstated, or can't be overstated. Let's say, can't be overstated. The partnerships are truly the hallmark of our community, and we invite all in, whether it's town boards, the Historical Society, Aging and Disability, I can't name them all, the Historical Society, I'm gonna look around the room, safety, Public Works, thank you, the Board of Ed, all of artists and musicians, we welcome everybody. So I just want to say that there have been cuts to our budget already. That's going to be hard for us to endure. We've lost half the position of our Business and Career Center and $23,000 in cuts to our materials. That's not sustainable long term. We can endure some things short term, just like everybody as a good partner in the community to try to partner and bear those difficult times. But going forward, we'll have to try to gain those back. So just to know that that's not an easy cut for us to endure. Thank you for your dedication and planning, and thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you. And we did receive your letter earlier. It was shared with the full board.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. Before we begin, I just want to begin by recognizing everyone who has contributed to the budget. It represents months of hard work, and I don't want that to get lost in tonight's discussion. I wanted to start by acknowledging and thanking everyone in this room and outside this room who have put in hours on this budget thus far. First, members of the Board of Finance, we have with us Lalitha Shivaswamy, Dr. Shivaswamy. Arthur Wallace is joining us online, Robert Helfand, Mike Doyle, and Regina Penn. Finance Director Amy Merriweather and Budget Director Melissa Appleby provided support to all three boards with our thanks. On the town side, Town Manager Mark Nelson, First Selectman Wendy Maxtutis, and the Board of Selectmen, and the many department heads, some of whom are here with us tonight, and staff who helped build this document from the ground up, our thanks. On the education side, Superintendent of Schools Matt Curtis, Board of Education Chair, Jeff Tyndall and his board, and the administrators and staff. We have Neil with us today who are here, and some of who could not be here tonight. Each board has a different role in the process, but we all share a common obligation to the taxpayers of Simsbury. That means delivering services residents need at a level they expect and at a level they can afford by using every dollar efficiently and passing budgets that are structurally sustainable, not just for this year, but in the years that follow. The Board of Finance has a specific role within this process. As an independent fiduciary, we are tasked by state law to look at the budgets as a whole, not from the perspective of any one department or board. To fulfill our fiduciary duties, like any fiduciary board, we are obligated to ask questions on behalf of our citizens, to test assumptions, and to require adequate documentation and information before we act. That responsibility is not a reflection of distrust toward anyone in this room. It is simply how sound, responsible oversight works, and frankly, it is what our residents expect. A budget of this size affecting every household in town deserves that level of scrutiny. We did submit a number of questions in advance of tonight, and I want to thank staff, particularly Melissa, for their work in responding. Good information is the foundation of good decisions. And with the talented professional staff this town has, we are confident we can work through the details to arrive together at the right outcome for our community. Tonight, and throughout this process, we will be asking questions across several areas. We want to be clear. This reflects our assessment of the fiscal picture we are looking at and the economic conditions we're all looking at, not a lack of confidence in any one individual. We hope that at the end of this process, after questions from this board, from the public, and with the assistance of staff, residents will feel fully informed and confident in the budget they are being asked to vote on. Tonight, we're going to hear first from the Board of Education and then take a minor break and then move on to the Board of Selectmen. I know Mr. Roy has to leave in about 5 minutes, so we will have an opportunity to ask questions later. I did get the opportunity to ask him a question before the meeting, which I'll relay during the Board of Selectmen process. So with that, Matt, if you're ready, what we'll do, if our board is agreeable to this, we'll let Matt get through his full presentation before we open it up for questions. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everybody. I do appreciate the opportunity to come out and give an overview of what is a pretty complex and comprehensive budget in a few slides, and look forward to the dialogue that comes after. So, Amy's gonna steer the ship for me here this evening. So, when we do our planning, and certainly in presentations to our Board of Education, I heard before, the creation of a strategic plan at the library board. We work under a strategic plan on a model of continuous improvement with 4 main goal areas. And the budget process is one we certainly try to align with the decisions we're making with the 4 area goals. One is certainly around student growth and success and how we measure the success of our students. We have a school climate goal. We have a premier workforce goal in terms of hiring the best people we can and analyzing our staffing structures, and a goal around sustainable investments, which by large is our capital investments. So those are the 4 areas. I know we have a couple new members of the Board of Finance. This is kind of old hat for most of us that have been through it, but in terms of the process, Lisa, you talked about kind of moving forward from today on, but it's a process that starts for the Board of Education as early as November, and I just wanted to let people, give people some background information on that. We start with the building principals, boots on the ground, meeting with their program directors in terms of identifying needs and analyzing their staffing and programming. We bring that up to central office with kind of formalized presentations from our principals and main program directors in the December timeframe. That's also when we had the tri-board meeting this year. I would say I've been doing this for a little while. I've had 14 tri-board meetings, and I thought the one we had this past year, I honestly felt it was extremely focused on what the kind of the end goal was, and a recognition of the uncertain fiscal times that people are in. And this budget development process for our Board of Education, while we certainly always take it very seriously, was certainly a march more or less towards an end game of trying to come up with a number and still put forward a budget that we can feel good about. And I think we've accomplished that goal this year. We move forward then, with our public presentations, which are two main presentations. One is the special education review. The other is a staffing and enrollment review that Neil provides to our board. And then we had a large kind of scale workshop in February where I presented to the board. And then they took my budget, asked for some alterations, and I present, this to you tonight in terms of the Board of Education approved budget. So that is the big number, north of $91 million, an increase of 2.4 million, an overall percentage increase over last year's operating costs of 2.79%. Really three different areas I'll go through pretty quickly tonight. One is some contextual factors. I think it's important to understand what the board was considering in making decisions. Return on investment section, we always like to measure up kind of how we're doing against our past data and other districts' data. And then quick synopsis of kind of the main drivers prior to opening it up for questions from you. So from a contextual point of view, it's a balancing act, right? We gather information from the tri-board meeting. We look at where we are economically. We look at where we are kind of operationally as a board. And some of the main factors to consider this year were the cost of living increase of 2.8%. I know, Lisa, in your board, that's one of the main factors that you kind of gear guidance off of. We recognize that our local mill rate in comparison to other communities that we compete with for residents is high. So that's certainly a challenge when people make choices on communities. We've also talked about reserve funds, not only on the Board of Finance level, but on the Board of Ed level with our non-lapsing accounts and how we can potentially utilize those dollars without creating future challenges to lower operating costs. And certainly the last 3 years, we've seen significant tax increases in town. So thinking about that local context with our themes and what we're trying to do, right? We're obligated to meet contractual obligations. This is year one of a large new teacher contract that we had to absorb. We're looking at cost controls through new in-house specialized programs that we got the support of both boards that are in this room that we're opening now that we feel very positive about. And we move forward a budget to talk about tonight that's not it's not a inspirational budget. It's not an innovative budget. It is a maintenance budget by all means. And we wanted to protect main priorities like class size guidelines while we're inching them up a little bit. The budget we present and the reductions we have don't put our class sizes outside of our policies, which I think are important. And we've taken a hard look at vacant positions in various positions to see if we can either repurpose them or reduce them. So I have a few positions like that to talk about tonight. But that's the overall kind of balancing act that we get involved with every year. When we think about return on investment, I always, one important area to point to, I think, is this per pupil expenditure. It is one of the very few kind of consistent numbers across school districts that you can look at that are audited and are apples to apples. So the data you see is 23-24 data compared to 24-25. We always get a year lag data from the state on this. And it's a representation of what it costs to educate our students. So that top line is Simsbury's cost year over year in comparison with a DIRG-B average. Now, for those that aren't familiar with what a DIRG is, it's a district reference group. We're grouped with 20 other districts that are comparable in a lot of different demographics, including kind of their financial kind of makeup as a community. So I think what this slide points to is that we are, that I want to highlight anyhow, is that we're below that DIRG average. In 27 Hartford area towns, we're close to the middle. I believe we provide a service and we provide a level of programming that is well above average and towards the top, which I'll demonstrate in a little bit. And we do so at a pretty reasonable cost from an expenditure standpoint. I put some of the peer community data there. You can see Farmington and Avon a little bit lower, Glastonbury and West Hartford a little bit higher. Provided some recent budget history that demonstrates some of the challenges we've talked about it. A 10-year average of about 2.8, but recent more 5-year average of a higher budget as we've tried to really kind of balance some of these increased costs for mandates and for special education. Piece I did want to point to, I've collected all the budget presentations for the comparative districts in our DIRG. I've included some there for your review. My point is the 2.79 is an outlier. I mean, we marched towards a number this year and really trying to get to a place that our comparative districts aren't anywhere near. The average of our 20 districts in the DIRG is 5.8. And I just don't say that to say, look where we are. I just want to know that I want people to know that this was a challenge. I feel we've really collectively, all three boards worked collaboratively to identify the importance of it. And we did our very best to get to a number that is right near that guidance that you have provided us. In terms of student growth and success, I've just highlighted a few areas in terms of how our students achieve. So Simsbury High School, when we compare the state report card, which is called the performance index, it's about 16 different data points, achievement, programming, enrollment in AP courses, arts offerings, a wide variety of different measures. Simsbury High School has the highest index rating in the entire DIRG, something that we're proud of. Top 5 in the DIRG in performance in state measures in all areas, English language arts, math, and science. Simsbury High School students are at an all-time high in the percentage of students participating in AP exams and scoring at a 3 or above. 72% of our students have met the mark in math at the middle school, which is the highest since the new assessment, the Smarter Balanced Assessment, has come into the accountability era as the assessment that they do use. We've had work to do in that area of math at the middle school, and we're starting to feel better about the progress we're making. And elementary performance and achievement has always been strong based on the different grade level and different assessment. We're number 1 in several, we're 2 in several, we're 3, but we're no lower than 5 in all of them. So areas that we feel good about, at least from an achievement standpoint, that our programs are supporting our student needs and our kids are doing well. All right, so moving on to the dollars a little bit. When you take our initial budget planning and we start from kind of a fixed cost mindset and roll things forward, this is what our operation looks like. When we roll forward our contractual obligations, the insurance estimates that we talked about early on that we received, even some of the costs in our special education, we move forward and put in this number. We kind of initiate our planning at a 3.85% increase over last year's operating cost. So some of the details there that I wanted to draw attention to. The first 2 line items, we often say, and when we have to make hard decisions about reductions, we are a people business. So under normal circumstances, 80% of our costs are salaries and their benefits. On the main driver sheet I show you right here, it's about 93, 94%. Because I think in the planning that we've moved forward in the areas in that other 20%, we just really have not asked for much. We're flat in a lot of accounts, we're down in several accounts, and we've really kind of moved forward what our personnel costs are. The other drivers there that I wanted to draw attention to, special education, that's about a 5% increase to the overall tuition line item, which is one that Board of Finance members will know, even Board of Selectmen sitting through these presentations, had been much more significant in prior years. We have come to the board the last 3 years asking for total special education outlay of close to 1.5 million. So I think some of the changes we've made, some of the program improvements we've made have helped to stabilize spending in what is a very large and kind of volatile financial part of our operation, and feel much better about where we are from not over a service point of view, but a financial point of view. The larger offset there, equipment is an area that we zero-based budget every year, based on need and really based on kind of looking at things. So we are offsetting Chromebooks. We're a 1-to-1 Chromebook kind of outfit from grade 2 up. Every student has a Chromebook, so we have a rotating buy schedule on that when kids graduate and grades that we select to buy new Chromebooks on. We had a reserve fund. We call it a Chromebook insurance fund that we repair Chromebooks out of, that we hadn't had to utilize the way we thought we would the prior year in the budget with year-end savings. So we're actually going to buy the Chromebooks this year out of that fund, which I think is an appropriate use of that fund, and it allows us to take that equipment expenditure down $250,000. So all in all, that's a breakdown of kind of the major pieces. So that brings us to how are we going to try to drive that number down responsibly. We have total reductions that we're presenting of 1.1 million or 1.3%. And you'll see it's largely staffing. So we are reducing 5.8 full-time equivalent positions from our operating budget. It's a combination of an administrative shift. We're eliminating an administrative position. We had an opportunity to do that with a member of our administrative team moving. We really took a look at analyzing roles and responsibilities, and we're kind of creating a new system and structure in our organization to absorb that. We had two student-facing positions, I would call them. They're not classroom positions, more support positions, where we had retirements, one in the current year, one in a future year that we are not going to fill. And then the remaining, basically 3 full-time equivalent positions, I would say are pretty much enrollment driven. Our enrollment is stabilized. It's projected to be stabilized over the next 5 years. It's a positive and it's also a negative, I always say, in our budget planning process. The positive is we don't have a lot of enrollment driven requests. Negative is it's not easy to find FTE within there in a way without impacting the organization. But the K enrollment is coming in a little lower than we had thought. And our class sizes change from 2nd grade to 3rd grade, gives us an opportunity to look at that. And we're planning on absorbing some FTE. So it's a significant reduction in staffing dollars from our operating budget of over $700,000. We're fortunate nobody is losing a job in this scenario, and we feel pretty confident that we can move forward and still provide good quality services with this reduction. But it's going to have to be something certainly we monitor because we're trying some new things. Go back for 1 second, Amy. I didn't hit on one. Next one.
Back.
No, one more forward. Right at the bottom, I'm sorry. So that basically, when you take that reductions off that rollover of fixed costs, we're at about a 2.55% increase. We did have some additional needs that people advocated for that we are putting into the budget that I wanted to share that pull that number back up to the 2.7. So we have one special education teacher that we're adding in our operating budget. That's at Latimer Lane School. That's straight enrollment related. We have kind of caseload size guidelines that guide our decisions for special education staffing, just like our classroom numbers guide for teaching positions. And it dictates that is the one area in our district that continues to grow, that we need an additional teacher there to manage the needs appropriately for our caseload. So that is in the budget. We have some part-time positions, a speech and language pathologist. That is something our leadership advocated for last year. We did not put forward, but we have high numbers and caseloads there. So we're adding part-time equivalents there. And we have a 0.2 strings that my Board of Education has wanted me to add for 5 years that I haven't yet, but we have that 0.2 in at Squadron Line School. And then others are just nursing hours and things from increased need that have been identified at our building level. Overall, it's about $212,000 on the new side when you look at that, which brings the entire budget back up to that 2.79% increase that I had presented initially. What I did want to talk briefly about is just kind of how the game changed halfway through for us, because I think it's important to note. So I had planned at our workshop to present a 2.79% budget increase in alignment with the guidance to my board. 2 days prior to that, Amy, who always hits me with good news, hit me with bad news in that our insurance estimate went the wrong way. So we got updated insurance claims, we got new projections, fixed cost increase of $400,000 to the operating cost. So the way I chose to present that to my Board of Education is I presented the 2.79, we put the 400,000 on top of it, we don't have an option to pay that or not pay that, brought us back up to 324. And what my board did at the end of that workshop was to direct me and my administration to come back and find the $400,000 or at least provide options for us to look at to bring it back down to that target number. So the way we did that is up on this final slide. So this was kind of the last push of our administration, was to find where we would make the reductions to get that number back down to 2.79. It was a 1.0 reduction of an elementary section. We have 3 or 4 different sections we're monitoring now that we could take from and still be within class size guideline. In the 120 sections that we have, I'm not going to commit to which one that is now. I'm going to come back and report later to the Board of Ed on that as we make those final decisions. We're going to take an additional full-time equivalent position from Simsbury High School as Neil works with the administration and determines where that will best be from. We have a couple retirements, but it'll probably be multiple content areas chipping away a little bit, 0.2 here, 0.2 there, pushing class sizes up, but not pushing them past the guideline. We've offset that special ed ask that was new. We have a new grant from the state of Connecticut for special education initiatives. We're going to utilize that with the new request, so it's an appropriate use. And we're going to utilize non-lapsing dollars for additional equipment, one-time equipment purchase that I'm not concerned with a cliff about. And that gets us to the 400,000 and back down to the 2.79%. So I just wanted your board to be aware that we were at the number, we weren't at the number, we pushed to our best to get back at the number that was stated, and this was the broad view, kind of the macro view of how we got there. The utilization of the non-lapsing dollars still leaves us with $576,000, which I wanted to share with the board today because I think it's important. With $91 million budget that doesn't have contingencies, that we have the ability to respond particularly to the volatility of special education, move-ins, new students come into district, needs of students that we currently have that may shift. So we have the ability with some non-lapsing dollars to be responsive there. And as this board knows, that's an area that we've been stressed recently. We haven't had that type of allocation in non-lapsing for last year was the first year, but for a few years prior. So I feel like overall we're in a better shape to respond to the unknown than we have done. And when we come in, I think a little tighter than we have, like we have this year, I think that'll be important for us to manage within the dollars that we end up being allocated. So that is 91 million in a nutshell. Amy's put together a couple slides because I think there was a request. I know we had quite a bit of conversation last year about the New Path program, how that's structured, kind of the finances of it as we aim to make that a self-sustaining program, much like Farmington Valley Transition Academy. So Amy has just a couple quick slides to go over on that program as well. I have Neil here if there's any capital discussion about the 3 things that we have in year 1 capital, but other than that, we can open it up for questions.
Go through your path first.
Yeah.
So on the left-hand side, you'll see the 2027 proposed budget going into the next fiscal year. The 2027 concept plan, this is what we presented when we presented to the Board of Finance on why we wanted to purchase the building that we purchased. How we thought it would move through, I believe it was a 3-phased approach at the time, and what we were thinking would be the financial impact year over year and how we would see some cost containment. So the concept plan, we're just gonna take it in comparison to what was actually budgeted. So that first line, that tuition line, that $70,000, initially we had planned for 1 tuition. The $400,000 is anticipating 5 tuitions. You'll see on the third line down the out-of-district student reallocation. We originally planned for 4 students to come back into district, that 461,000, but we're only having 2 students currently come back into district, so that 258,000. So there's capacity in our program where we were able to take in additional tuitioned in students. The out-of-district students that are coming back in for fiscal year 27, we're focusing on the high school. And then in future years, we will implement the middle school and the elementary schools. So that's why we kind of swapped from the concept plan where we're having additional tuition in and 2 less students coming back in from out of district. The middle line there, that personnel line for 236,000, that was part of the concept plan. It just wasn't presented because it's cost neutral. So if you look, that 236,000 is going to be a contribution in from the general fund because those staff already are part of the Board of Education. They're just going to be part of the New Path program now. So we're going to transfer where we had budgeted in the general fund and give those funds to the New Path program. So that first line that you see over here, this personnel line, that 723,180, if you subtract out that 236, because this is the money that's going to fund them, this is actually paying them, that 723. If you subtract out the 2 of those, it's about 487,000. If you take the 487 compared to the 417, you'll see that that's an increase of about $70,000, which is 1 additional para in the proposed budget compared to the concept plan. On the instructional side, the $77,000 compared to the $30,000, there are 2 additional students than what we had planned for. And then in addition, they purchased the technology associated with the building and the students. And then our maintenance is pretty much in line with the concept plan. So under the concept plan, we had anticipated a $400 surplus. And under the proposed budget, it's about $7,800. Any questions on that before I move forward to clarify? Okay. And then just the cost containment piece. So if we have the New Path program, those are the figures on the left. We have tuitions and services of about $258,000 that is built into the general fund budget. If we did not have this program, we would have built in $284,000. So that's a first year cost containment of $25,000. For the new members, and just a refresher from the previous members that were here, we only anticipated getting a cost containment, I believe, in year 3. The first year was a transition year. The second year we planned a deficit, and then the third year is when we planned actual cost containment. So the fact that we're getting any cost containment is better than what we had anticipated. And I think that's it for slides.
Is that it? That's it. I'll just start by thanking you. That was an excellent presentation. Our board has had the opportunity to see previews of the budget throughout the year as you do presentations. We do forward them to the board members so they've had the opportunity to see some of your presentations. So none of this was a surprise. Very pleased with the New Path for the public who is watching. That's to Farms Village.
Yes.
Not West Street, to Farms Village. And I had the opportunity to tour it with Matt and Tom Roy, who's not here. It's just fabulous.
Yeah.
A beautiful space that I think will encourage great educational programs. And I want to congratulate the 3 boards who worked together on that.
I'd like to thank everybody as well. I think that's an innovation that will pay dues and really help us with cost containment moving forward.
And provide better services.
Absolutely.
So it's a win.
Closer to home, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So would like to open it up for questions from our board. I'm gonna start with Art because he's online in case he wants to go first, and I'm worried I'm gonna forget to go to you, Art.
No, I appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, sorry. So Amy, quick question for you. Those are great presentations overall, by the way. I think everything is very clear and consistent with how you guys have shown it previously. I was curious about New Path. I think we had originally said what a payback period of 5-ish years, if I remember right, 5 or 6 it might have been.
Correct.
But this is like the first year, as you said, so it's a little bit lumpy. Where does that put us on the path of that payback period? Like that year, even though this year it looks like the savings to me looks small relative to the expenditures we put into the deal. I think your point was that over years 2, 3, and 4, it starts to ramp up pretty significantly. So I guess my question is, like, are we on path to be able to do that? Like, are we on the right pattern, I should say, to be able to get back to where we thought we would be?
Yeah, I would say that we're on track. I mean, the $25,000 surplus as opposed to a deficit is a good starting point, but that, that's not a huge amount compared to the totality of the purchase. But we're no worse than what we were. So as of year 1, we are on the path that we had proposed.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I guess Superintendent Curtis, just really quickly, I think you mentioned some roles that were utilized to fund some of this, and I appreciate the creativity there. Are those roles like permanently sort of taken off the books? I also appreciate that you didn't actually eliminate people. You were going after open roles, which I think is always a smart thing to do, less disruptive. Are they sort of like quasi-permanently taken off the books right now, or how are you thinking about those roles?
No, they're permanently taken off the books.
Okay.
What's the driver behind permanently taking them off? Is there a shift in how those services are rendered? And what is the driver behind that?
Yeah, there will. So, administratively, without getting too much into the detail of the role, it's an analyzation of those roles and responsibilities. It's splitting them across 2 other administrative roles, building those people's capacity and taking advantage of the savings. When we make a decision to cut a position and move it forward, that position's out of our operating costs. There's not a placeholder for it. So while we will evaluate and have more conversation moving forward in terms of from a budgeting standpoint, the dollars they're gone. So the position's gone.
Okay. I have a question about the cost containment for New Path. So this is very nice that you're able to contain this right off the get-go. Now, what is different? What's the different? What happened that was different that allowed this to happen versus what you anticipated? And is that something that you anticipate being sustainable?
Can I?
You can try.
Yeah, no, I think that just one piece in the overall planning, you have a concept when you move forward on this. And it was twofold, really, from a programmatic standpoint, right? We want to provide programming that our Simsbury students are comfortable with, that may be an outplacement that come back. There's a process to making those decisions. And we want to have a program that looks desirable to outside districts who would want to take their students who need a different environment and come to us. I can say without a doubt, we've received significant interest from outside districts quicker than we thought we would. We just moved into the new building. So that's a shift in the increased revenue that you're seeing coming in, is the projection of 5 outside tuitions that will help us cover cost. Reflect 2 things. I think it reflects the reputation of Simsbury, and it reflects the absolute need of placement programs for students in other districts, which is something we talked about at great length last year. The state is under scrutiny due to the capacity of the programs that they've approved and aligned. They've encouraged districts to move forward and develop their own programming. And I think once you do that, it's not a matter if it will be attractive to other districts, it's can you absorb the volume of the need that they have.
It's a good problem to have.
I'll go to Mike. Do you have anything?
You used $282,000 of non-lapsing funds, and I'm selfishly happy to see that money getting used. Never been a big fan of that fund, especially seeing it grow to almost $1 million. So I'm happy to see it being put in use, but I'm concerned that its use in the budget is creating any cliffs. Is that how is that allocated?
I mean, equipment, 100,000 of it, the last 100,000 was equipment that we look as a zero-based budget every year. So that number varies more probably than any other budgetary number that we plan, Mike. So it's not like a base number that we have to get back to next year. It's always a reevaluation of where we are. So it might lead to some harder decisions, but I wouldn't necessarily call that one a cliff. The other dollars we put towards the OPEB increase. That was a result of the decision that the Board of Finance made to gain long-term savings. So we looked at that as a good use. And that insurance line item, more than other line items, is kind of what's the state of the state on the day that we all collectively make those decisions of how we're going to use either the internal service fund dollars or our non-lapsing dollars. So always a chance that you create cliffs, but I think in the planning process, one-time supplies, yeah, as well, we use that for. So we try to be cognizant of it. But when we get down to the number of increase that we are, it's, you know, we're either people and we took over $700,000 of people, or we're looking for other ways to get at some savings too.
And again, I do appreciate you putting the tax dollars to use, right?
Yeah.
I do appreciate that.
Do you have a policy on what your triggers are to take a look at this fund and see if you're going to head towards a cliff, or is that something that's already built into your planning as a part of what you do?
Not a hard, fast policy. I mean, there's policy parameters and legislation around how much a Board of Ed can hold in that fund.
Okay.
And that the Board of Ed has to approve the expenditures in that fund. And now there's more reporting requirements that we just met with our board at, that now we have to inform our bargaining groups, believe it or not, of how we use the dollars in that fund.
Yeah.
But those are internal decisions we make on, quite honestly, risk we take on creating cliffs or not creating cliffs, or where we think we can utilize those dollars. Historically, those dollars have been used straight for special education. They haven't been used for a lot of, nice to haves or capital expenditures or anything else. They've been utilized to respond to areas where we have an emergency.
Thank you.
Yep.
I know we're in the people business here, but with lots of facilities. Can you talk a little bit about the facilities part of the budget? From the workshop materials, I was pleasantly but surprised to see that the projected facilities and security expenditure was going to be flat. And it always makes me a little bit concerned. Do we think that there's a risk that something's going to come up budget cycle, given the age of the building, that's going to be a large dollar value surprise? How's the board handling that?
I mean, we took a look at the accounts that you referenced and tried to just, to be honest, be as tight as we could be on them within a realistic kind of planning phase. The other ways we would address anything that come up would be through CNR. So that's the one flexible area that we do have. We get $550,000 in our capital non-recurring account. It's an area that we've advocated for different things over time, and an area where the Board of Finance has supported us, and we'd like to see those dollar figures grow. But we list out the projects we feel we're going to address using that 550, but there have been times when something comes up and we use some of those dollars to address, we had a pipe burst at Tooten Hills, right? We just had a major situation there. Or if we have to address something in the short term before we get the insurance dollars back, we can look at CNR. So to your point, it is very tight, but we looked at needs. We had real conversations about it, and we have an area that we could go to if we needed to. It's not ideal. It's not something we do on an annual basis. But like I said, this is not a aspirational or inspirational budget. This is a targeted look at how can we move forward what we need to continue to provide the services that we have.
Do you anticipate anything that requires us to help you through the CNR?
We planned our CNR this year by moving. The interesting thing about CNR, and one of the big challenges on the Board of Education side, is we've historically purchased buses out of CNR. So buses cost north of $100,000 now. So we traditionally try to purchase 2 out of the 550. So that leaves us not a whole lot of dollars in flexibility to address 7 buildings. So CNR is always a challenge. We've had success the last 2 years using the Capital Reserve Fund to increase those dollars. This year, as we looked at things, we have some major capital in the turf field and things that are going to keep our staff busy. We looked at the 550 that we freed up moving a bus out. along with a new grant we've just received from the state of Connecticut called the DRIP grant. It's almost $200,000. So we have access to about $700,000 as a manageable number, project management number for us, because unlike the town, we have to get our work done in the summer.
Yeah.
So we don't have, we don't have the capacity to take on $3 million of CNR work because we can't get it done. So we feel like 700 this year with the priorities that have been listed is a solid number for us. Doesn't mean that I don't think we need to continue to look at that CNR structure. It's an old structure. It's one that hasn't moved over time and the needs have just increased. But that to me is a conversation outside of the operating budget that I presented here tonight. But it's a challenge for sure.
Sure.
All right.
So in the slide that showed the budget details before you went back, salaries and wages was an increase of 2.1 million or 2.4%. That's before the reductions that you were talking about. So do you know what those numbers are now?
I kick it to Amy for the detail on that. That would be in the budget book.
Yeah,
Or it would be on the,
so that 2.1 million
Right.
as compared to,
To what's in the final budget?
sure,
in the 279.
yeah, so 2 point,
That percentage is not line item percentage, that's over the total budget.
Yes.
So what is the line item increase in salary?
so we did So if I take the 2.4 and I subtract out the salary reductions for the certified FTE, the admin FTE, and then I add in the added position, the speech and language, thus forth, it is 1.66. If we look at the line item increase, that 2.4 on the line item is 3.55.
And what is it after the reductions?
Is that after the reductions?
Nope, that's before, that's the equivalent to the 2.4. After it would be 2.81.
And this is, I mean, you just signed, was it a 3-year or 4-year?
3-year.
3-year. So do you expect in the next 2 years that the increase in salaries will be roughly the same? Would be that, say, 2.81% each year?
It was a very similar spread across the 3 years.
That's my question.
Are there other questions? Art, did you have any follow-up questions? I've given Matt a couple of heads up questions I was gonna ask tonight. The first one is more an observation. You had enrollment projections that came in significantly under last year.
Yeah.
And that, to your credit, took that, and that's part of the reductions made to reflect the enrollment numbers. So I do wanna acknowledge that publicly and thank you for doing that at 20, about 100 students at 20,000. 2 million, not one-to-one costs, but certainly the ability to do that, and we appreciate you doing that. The other thing I do wanna acknowledge is that special education costs have been escalating the last few years, and I do wanna thank the Board of Selectmen who had some vacancy savings that were given to the Board of Ed to help us balance their budgets in a couple of years, so I wanna acknowledge that as well. It was a whole team effort by all three boards. But because we then budgeted those cliffs methodically over the last few years. Again, congratulations to the 3 boards who supported that. We're not seeing the huge jump that some of the other towns are right now, in part because of that, in part because of the new path, in part of all the innovation that your board has done. So I want to acknowledge that publicly and use it as an example of really good planning. So that's how we're able, in part, how to do some of that, and to your board for your work in getting to that number. It is a very, very tight year. We just heard from the state that the musical cap is at 2.5, was it? Which is gonna be tight. When you saw those other DERGs, they're not gonna hit the cap. So that might expose them to lost state dollars. The budget we're considering tonight will hit the cap, is that right? Okay. For the track and field project, I know at the Board of Selectmen meeting, we're gonna come back, and maybe I just missed it, with annual operating costs. Were you able to get that?
Did you get anything on that, Neil?
I did not.
Okay.
I will.
Okay.
For the,
Perfect. And then the track and field timeline, I think you said you plan to start that this summer? What is the timeline?
no, not this summer. The vendor who's under a state contract is very aware of the timeline of a May referendum and can lock in the pricing as long as the referendum passes in May. So the 2.2 million earmarked for this, we can lock in that pricing. This summer is way too jammed to try to get in a project, because this is a full replacement of the track. Last time we did the track, it was a refinishing. So the timeline that they need to safely be open for football season and soccer season and field hockey, I don't want to just say football, it would be Memorial Day of 2027, and then should be done by the start of school in that same summer.
It's good for the public to know.
Yes.
You're gonna be doing it, but not this year. This year will be a planning, I assume.
Yeah, and it would have been very difficult to try to put that project on top. There's still also some review of once we get more detailed drawings, it is wetlands, so it's gonna have to go through some of the local commissions, and we need time to be able to do that. But mostly we were concerned about being able to lock in the pricing. So.
Thank you. And then sort of the open question, I know I think it was November, you guys had a presentation on Squadron Line, and sort of the elephant in the room. Very large numbers discussed, 130 million. The reason why I ask is for our planning, the decisions we make today in this year's budget will depend on what we think is coming down the road. So do you have an idea yet of when we can expect to see that? I know I think I heard, although there seems to be some confusion, that it's not gonna be on the CIP next year.
Yeah, I don't think there's any confusion on that. I think we've said that all along.
But CIP 5 years, so it's not gonna be on the 5 year?
Not this year's 5-year. So to your point, we had the presentation in November where we looked at 3 options. One was kind of what would it take to maintain over time, and it's a very costly option. We looked at as a renovate as new and a build as new. I had a meeting with our finance subcommittee just this past Friday to talk to them about what did they feel were some feasible next steps for discussion moving forward for the balance of this year. So we've met with Tecton again. We need to do quite honestly, some site assessment work about areas for the new build, because there may be different options on the road, demolition in the back. Some more information on additional reimbursement opportunities at the state level that make this 136 million total project look different by really shifting our reimbursement opportunities with preschool development and special education program development. Simsbury doesn't stand comparatively very well on the reimbursement scale at the state level. We get about 25 to 28%, I think, normally on a new build. This new legislation would allow us to look at close to 50%. which I feel like is a game changer, at least conversationally with what we're looking at. But we need to bring the conversation back to our Board of Education, hopefully by the end of the year, and have a public conversation and a vote about which of those options they would like to move forward for a collaborative conversation with the Board of Selectmen. And at that point, we would decide the best place to position that on the 5-year plan. So in terms of your ability to plan and want more information and a desired timeline, I understand it. You do have all the numbers that we looked at that we have. So the spreadsheets can grind, I think, in terms of what you want to look at. We can't give you a hard commitment on what that looks like in terms of where it's going to sit on a future plan. But we've put all our energies this year towards this operating budget and quite honestly, moving out a lot of the capital from what we had initially in year 1 to year 2 and behind and beyond. So I don't have more for you on that.
It's okay. I guess I would say what our board will need when we do have that is we need to understand the squadron line will obviously increase the overall debt service line item for 20 years. So I think we need an understanding of sort of what are the main capital projects coming, the big ones like roofs, major equipment over that period.
Yep.
So what we don't want to do is have 4 roofs at the time debt service is spiking
Yeah.
or have debt service spike during the next reval.
Yep.
Or so we just, if we could get, I know you have within your research, the master plan for the town, it does have the major capital needs. And we know how long roofs last, 30 years, we know how, so if we could get just a broad look at that. And the one thing I would say to both boards is if you need resource help getting that, we are prepared to give it to you. Because we think that's gonna be a crucial part of any planning for squadron line to understand, to make sure that we can take care of the other needs of the town without cost. So if we could get that, and if there are resources you need, if you could bring that to the April hearing as well, if you think you're gonna need resource help with that. You don't have to answer that tonight.
It sounded like there was at least some additional site work that would need to take place for the team to make the progress they need to this year. Is that reflected in there? And if not, where are you gonna get the resources to go and do that?
We have a contract already in current year operating with Tecton to be able to do it's limited work that we're doing kind of.
Sure, but enough to keep on that schedule.
Yes, yep.
Are there any other questions for members of the Board of Education? Jeff, I wanna give you an opportunity if there's anything you wanna say.
No, appreciate the dialogue. Matt and team has laid it out very well. This is a maintenance budget and that we take very seriously. And just appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all tonight.
Let's just close by saying the information we got was very substantive, well organized. I read it and I didn't have any questions. Having watched some of your meetings online or looking at your agenda things, I do want to appreciate all the work that your board did and extend our thanks to everyone who worked on this, both staff, Matt, thank you, and Amy, Lisa, and of course the Board of Education, really nice job. Any other last comments, and we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Come back in about maybe 10 minutes, so everyone should eat their sandwich.
Yeah, I'm not telling you.
Oh,
Nothing that I said so.
We're not gonna give you that.
Can I just say, and I really appreciate the time, the layout.
There's some good historical stuff.
It was written by a branch of government that's got lots of opinions from all kinds of households, and it made it really easy for, people who speak from
Yeah, I know.
Good.
to jump in and kind of get it. So
Anytime if you wanna meet or, I've done that in the past too. 4 to 5 years. That's funny.
We were so
Good,
and
good,
even
Yeah.
we had just spoken questions.
good, good.
Facilities questions are never tough.
Never. Excellent.
That you know, we have 2 engineering degrees, right?
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Busy time of year.
Okay.
Oh, I gotta get my stuff. Not the most.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be great.
I don't mind.
Okay.
I just
Okay.
didn't, you know, in the middle of the meeting, I didn't wanna.
Yeah, alright.
Share, it's good.
Am I sitting here?
Yes, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch out.
I'll,
Mustache,
I'll,
but I was drinking
you
a
don't know you-
cold.
where were you?
This year.
Is that all right?
There's spinach.
Oh, wow. Really wants to know where the tortillas are.
If you want the pointers
Yeah,
here,
thank you.
otherwise just
Where are you going?
I'm going over there. Well, I mean, I can, but
Why don't
it's a
you?
little cramped.
Hey, how are you?
Pretty good.
Having their sandwiches at night.
Oh, thank you so much.
I just get eating things up as I go. I should have bought my water bottle. Can you do the slides for me? Sure. Good. Then I'm gonna look on my laptop.
Oh.
I just was running around. I thought I was so smart. Parent teacher conferences today. We're expected to see the impact of mom has a new job and no one's doing her homework. I was right. That was part of the conversation. And I was like, oh, this is great.
Please be in touch.
Full flavor is like all original.
Cause I'm putting 110 miles on my car every day. Just an oil change. $1,500 later. I needed my tires and I got it yesterday.
I know it's
He has a way.
That also happens.
especially if I'm over to the
I don't have it.
I am.
Yeah.
It's all highway.
Yeah?
Is this yours?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna slide it over. Oh, I need my water.
Oh.
They haven't thought of that. I wish I could eat something, but I can't because I have to wait till after.
So we're gonna reply.
My damn son is fast.
You know, as I said, we'll get.
My damn son really just 5 places a week, Saturday and a Sunday. Hartford Marathon Foundation, this is just like a very accuracy series. Yeah. So we did it this weekend, we're gonna do it next weekend.
That's
great.
Yeah, over
Second
the
day,
summer.
minute and a half fast. Is there anything? Is there anything? Is there any like no school running group or anything like that? I was on the website, I didn't see anything, but I don't know where to look for it.
Lisa, thanks for bringing it.
Oh, there you want some?
I didn't have it.
I love sitting here. No. Oh, I wanna eat. I know I can't eat and she's like, I just go around and no, I'll get it after.
Do you want a water?
I have water.
Hold it until you're done.
I have.
Can't get it after.
Oh, well, we're gonna have a break.
Yeah. We're hitting the spot.
I was not. I was just.
You said 3.3.
And I don't know what it's either, you know? I don't know what it is. I'm looking at this slide. Smart. Right. Seem like I don't know. Go
Your expenses are high.
I'm intrigued by everything that's out right now, right? He's very good right now. I'm looking at him. I go. Which one is it? The oldest one. I don't wanna go. The youngest isn't. Yeah, he's putting the tenant on it. We'll see. Next year will be. I don't even know.
Oh, yeah, the doctor
Well, you know what, hold up for a minute and say, as the superintendent indicated, we were faced with the same problem on this side. With a few days to go, we got that word, and, you know.
So it bumped us up to 3.
Right, that's what I'm gonna just say.
Yeah, 2251. Past weekend. Any questions?
Well, you know.
It has run in March. We're not there's no I can make 35. And this one. We're trying to do there's a challenge. Run 169, which is your run of race.
at least a mile in a structured road grade.
I just thought it was
For me, I mean, I great art years, and every year I think we wanna close that gap, is my, and I've made that point.
a decent, not phenomenal, a decent run at seeing. I love it. So I've gotta tell you, I love sitting there.
Then I can look at right in the line of vision in the chair, the peons on the
Get the best view of the
These are awesome. Well, we talked about last night because Chris was here all night and then she finally said at the end she needed a comfy chair. We had her sitting right there all night.
Kevin, who was the gentleman who was here all night?
I gave him my card. He said his name, but I never met him
The
before.
reporter.
And he never.
I heard he was a reporter.
Yeah, he was a reporter.
Tried to write something up about the 4-year
Wow.
thing.
Wow.
And he was
He
arguing.
was being a little bit, yeah, like, okay, but look, dude, calm down.
I think this like.
That's what we did.
He was really argumentative.
Yeah, I hadn't seen him before, so.
This is my gate, this is my gate.
No?
I actually been driving, but I'm going to the city.
I mean, I appreciate your hedges whenever I go to work.
Yes, but I got my son. Yes.
Okay?
Fine.
You sure you don't wanna eat?
Well, I didn't know we'd be waiting this long, so I'm not gonna eat. Eat. No, I had this professional meeting with like budget. Yeah, exactly. Some lettuce rolls out.
Unbelievable restraint of not jumping off of my chair.
What?
Not to mention, most of what she's talking about are actual federal laws.
Sounds like a violation of law.
No, it's not.
Definitely.
No,
And yet, as they then go about talking about how actually containing students is
Well, you're
No, it's your party, I'm just here to help.
Absolutely. You know, I think on the voters each one is 24.
I believe the sun is 21st.
20th. Anyway, times. I like this part.
One of your kids is
Welcome.
I missed your meeting.
Oh yeah, charter.
It's still locked, it is a little later.
Kind of we're sending back with some, only, one big ask, but the rest are, well, you can see.
I was surprised you got through it all last night.
Yeah, and a lot of it just.
I don't want it in my teeth and I don't wanna. I can't enjoy raising like all the, or you like.
Whatever Whole Foods.
Do you like the, yeah.
They've got little mini sandwiches and they've got different kinds of things. They've got a roast beef, they got a ham, and then they have a turkey. You want to get you something? It's very hard to get out. Raisins.
Thank you, hi. I get a hug.
What do you want, ham? Or
And
turkey?
But they're nice one, right? I mean, the language says, but so are others, including police commission, by the way. So like.
Cause I originally said I did gonna go that way, I don't love them nowadays. If that door opens up, I might learn his.
Okay, we'll let everyone take
So,
last bites.
it opens up.
Don't you just sit in front of the owl?
Right.
You like that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
No.
No, not really.
Oh.
You got 2 seconds?
How are you?
Okay.
All right, we're moving on. If everyone's ready, I'll give a wave to SCTV. Amy and Wendy, are you guys got
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. SCTV, we're gonna rejoin the meeting. Great, welcome back, everyone. We will now be hearing presentations from the Board of Selectmen budget. And our first selectman, Wendy Max-Studis, I believe, is doing the presentation.
I am doing the presentation, and Jeff got off easy, I guess, the Board of Ed. He didn't have to do his. Anyway, so I'm gonna open with the first selectman's budget message, if that's okay, to set the stage. I am actually gonna read it. During these uncertain economic times, we are tasked with doing our best to ensure tax dollars are used in the best interests of all our residents and taxpayers. This budget was voted on unanimously by our board's 6 members, and as members of the community, we understand how much each tax increase hurts all of us. We spent multiple nights and a Saturday working with the town manager and professional staff on this budget while simultaneously taking on the charter revision draft that had a hard stop. It's been a whirlwind for all of us, while also being down one man, Steve, who is dealing with the devastation of losing his home, among other things, and I just want to say we love you, Steve, and miss you. Every year, we do our best working with our town manager and the professional team to create a budget that provides the services that you all count on. Coming off the campaign trail last year, we heard from you about the things you love about Simsbury and the desire to preserve it for future generations. We also heard some concerns about taxes on the rise. So costs are going up everywhere, including federal cuts to key support programs that impact our residents and grants, along with state mandates like ECS that are not fully funded. And we are all looking at ways to maintain stability. This budget doesn't do anything too fancy. There are no major service improvements. There are a few changes from how things were done in the past, which I'll highlight. We supported our town manager's request for increasing funding for an economic development resources while maintaining our Simsbury Main Street Partnership funding. But we have charged the town manager to work with our current partners as he implements this new internal change to provide the resources needed to increase the grand list. CNR has been reorganized. Recurring expenses will now be covered in the operating budget. Using tax dollars and smaller capital items will be included there as well, using reserves and adding capacity for future small cap needs. On the capital side, the biggest item we approved is the $2.2 million project for the much needed Simsbury High School track and field to support our student athletes and the many residents who love walking and running on the track. We did ask a lot of questions about the track. We ended up with a 2.15 mill rate increase that provides the services our residents demand and supports the workforce that makes it all happen. Our tax dollars can be seen, investments over the last year, working everywhere in town. So the new Pathway School is opening its doors. The Flower Bridge opened last spring and is awaiting another season that can't come soon enough. The Performing Arts Center Next Act is under construction. The Terrifill plan is underway, and we provided additional improvements to Terrifill Park, just to name a few things that have moved forward since the last budget. My peers on the board all support this budget, and we're happy to answer questions. And a big thank you to Melissa for helping pull this tech together. Thank you. So I just want to show you our Board of Selectmen if you haven't seen us before. It's made up of, I'm the first selectman, Steve Antonio is deputy first selectman, Kevin Beal, Curtis Looney, Diana Yeisley are returning members, and Mike Payne has come back from prior years to rejoin the board. We just showing the budget calendar, where we are is in blue, and the next steps are gonna be the public hearing number 1, potentially public hearing number 2, and then a vote of the public for referendum. So the budget summary and highlights, it's a $30 million plus town operating budget, which is 23.4% of the total. About 70% is the BOE budget, and a little under 7% is our debt service. We're looking at about a $1 million increase, which is a 3.39% increase on the expense side. Our mill rate increase came out to be 2.15 and overall 33.73 exclusive of the fire district, which is 1.14 currently. A median home has a $224 tax increase. I think I have separate slides for this, but the budget drivers were the grand list, which is 0.9%, a decrease in investment income, and then a health insurance increase, which I'll touch on briefly. Well, I actually kind of just said this, but our grand list was about 9.9%, so we got an additional $1 million in revenue. We're sticking with the 98.5% collection rate. The governor's budget had a decrease of $137,000, and the interest rate assumption resulted in a decrease of $480,000. I just want to mention, as Matt did, the impact of the health insurance increase that we found out late. Mark found out late in the game. So we were targeting coming in a little bit under, but we ended up at the 3.39. So the budget as it looks today is the $30 million plus that I talked about, the 3.39 on the town side. And the overall expenditure budget is at 2.88%. Going to the mill rate calculation, which we'll have fun playing with later in the evening with the levy calc. We're at the 2.15, which basically results in the $224 home impact. And on the bottom of the slide, you can see the mill rate over the last few years. And the reval was 24?
Yes.
Okay, so the reval year was 24. One other thing I think this is a new slide here that we haven't had before, but it just shows, first of all, that we've been trying to decrease our tax increase, and we have over the last 4 years. And then just comparatively to the other towns in the valley that we have some information on. Word on the street is many towns are facing higher mill rate increases than we are. So being in the twos is good comparatively to our neighbors. I haven't heard from all of them at this point in time. So the changes from Mark's budget that we made were and I have some detail after this slide, which I can bring up, but we did do some of the recommended outside agency funding. We cut those, we decreased legal services, and we moved out the probate court fees to use reserves. We reinstated the Main Street Partnership, and I'll talk about that later. There was a little increase in social services. And then we also funded the ambulance request for the SVAA, which we could talk about later also. On the revenue side, there was just the $20,000 increase in investment income, and then the $140 for capital reserves and the Belden Trust. And then the next slide just shows you kind of the breakdown of the detail behind those numbers of where we made cuts on the outside agency funding and some of the other items. So the expenditure changed from Mark's budget. We increased the expenditures by 117, and we made a revenue change of 166. So I'm gonna get into the CIP a little bit. It really wasn't a huge CIP budget this year. Some of the items I could get into detail on, but I'll pick a couple. On the public works, it was about a $5 million budget, and $825 plus the $550 went to bonding. The historic building restoration was doing work on Boy Scout Hall, and I believe the community farm buildings to make sure that we keep up the current assets that we have. The WPCA I'm not gonna get into because I don't really know what they do other than they keep the water clean, and that's pretty much it. And they have their own special fund, so I'm gonna move on to the next slide, which is the Board of Ed. We funded quite a bit on the Board of Ed side, but basically all bonding of $2.8 million. On the community services side, we funded the 150 request for the greenway improvements. That is related to the Farmington Valley Heritage Trail and making sure that that's maintained, as it's a major thoroughfare and used by everybody in town and everybody not in town who bikes, walks, rides. So that's a Parks and Rec Parks and Rec item. The Simsbury Farms Clubhouse, I believe most of that is funded through the there was an external, offset and golf fees help pay for this. And it's the start of the renovations up at the clubhouse that us golfers are looking forward to seeing happen, to expand the restaurant and the pro shop to keep people on premises and just have a great place that attracts people to come play golf in town. One thing that I wanted to point out here for the Board of Finance, that I would like to recommend this change to you guys. So we funded the Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance. They had sent us a letter to fund $250,000 for a van style ambulance. $50,000 of that was for the accoutrements of the ambulance, the stretcher and other things. Mark had funded less. He came in at 60. We felt that public safety was a key focus and goal of our board. And also, they really don't have an ability to tax like the fire company does. So we felt that we wanted to support this initiative. We have a good partnership with them. I think we all, if we have to call it emergency services, we know it's a neighbor and friend that's coming to our door. And not somebody that's from out of town. So the ask that I have here is Mark originally had this in his budget on the operating side as an outside agency funding. We proposed moving it to, using reserves for the full amount, but we did not connect that dot to actually move it to the CIP, which is where we believe it belongs. The reason being we weren't sure that the town originally, it was said that the town shouldn't own the ambulance for liability reasons, but one of our selectmen, actually Kevin, raised the great point that it would be best if we could have a contract to own it, but lease it to the ambulance. And Mark is working with council to figure out the ins and outs of that so that we're not liable, that CERM is involved, and that it's the best situation for the town. So the recommendation here would be to put this into the CIP using capital reserves. And then what will happen is it will take out the $200,000 on the operating side where it exists today, correct?
It was funded partially by capital reserves in any event, right? So, yes.
Yeah, but
it belongs in CIP.
Yeah, and then the other piece to this is there will be an offset from the SVAA because this 200 will net out the fundraising that they do on capital, which we don't have a final figure on yet, because at one point we talked about how could we incorporate that into the budget as kind of a revenue. But Mark plans to work, there is a continued potential need by the SVAA so that Mark will work on some form of MOU with that would incorporate this payback kind of thing with the operating. I don't know what that looks like right now.
Just if I could jump in for the board's pleasure, the SVAA was doing its own capital raise, and at last report, Wendy, was it about 50,000 that they had raised on their own side, and that effort I think is continuing when last we heard. So the idea that the town attorney had was to lease it, and so there may be a revenue side over the term of the lease, which would be funded by the funds that they raise. So we haven't worked out all those details yet, but we're looking forward to getting into it.
And then I just put together this chart, and my Excel skills, they used to be better when I was in school. I couldn't remember how to get the sorting differently on the chart. I should have asked Amy. So the bonds is on the bottom, it should be on the top, but it basically shows we have the 2-year guidance on bonding, and I think this is the second year in that guidance, up to $10 million for the 2 million. So last year we bonded the 3.184, and this year we're at 5.5866. So we are within the $10 million bonding parameters. So I did want to highlight a few things that we received a lot of questions on in our changes to our budget, to just kind of try to explain this, and I'm sure there'll be questions on it, and I will defer to the experts on this. But in this budget, we're used to the CNR, so all of us have always had a CIP and a CNR budget and have had to look at both independently and make decisions on small capital purchase, large capital purchases, looking at it out 5 years. From a selectman perspective, it gives me less that I have to focus on, and I can look at our operating budget and I can look at our CIP and see the big cap items and then look at the smaller cap items. So the items, in this budget, some of the items that are continuing expenses are now using revenues and tax dollars. The items included in the operating budget are funded either through general fund or capital reserve funds. Recurring costs are covered with tax dollars, helping to kind of reduce the surplus and using current tax dollars. The smaller cap items are now shown in the department budgets to kind of help us look at it holistically, so that if Parks and Rec has a small cap item and they need it for, I don't know what this year, it kind of could act as a placeholder if there's another item next year that can slide into that spot and use reserves and stay within the Parks and Rec budget. We did do as much due diligence as we could, and I've talked to Mark and Amy. There's no negative impact to the audit, to the bond rating as far as moving to this methodology. So we were concerned about that. And the other question that came up, I think, from the Board of Finance chair was the pre-funding that we used to do in the 416 payback. I was also assured that there's no loan and that there is funding that covers any pre-funded amounts for the CNR. I'm sure there'll be questions on that. The small cap, so we did find that we do, we brought this up in our budget, and I'm sure you're noticing that we do need a cleaner way to track this from year to year, because we're going from how we used to look at it to a different way of looking at it. It started out first, we didn't even realize some of the CIP items were coming from the CNR, so we asked that question, and then we started narrowing down what we needed, and Melissa started delivering things so that we could look at it in a bigger picture way. So we ultimately have what's in the deck here, and I think the Board of Finance asked for this, showing what's under what department these small cap items are, which ones are funded by the general fund and which ones are funded out of reserves. The transition from year to year, I think, is where we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna look at it and track what's going on there. The next item that's come up is the police vacancy rate. So I wanted to talk about this item. So we do have an organization-wide vacancy rate, which we've continued to have based on the outstanding positions. I think right now there's 3 positions or 4 positions outstanding, not police. We get those in personnel subcommittee. But right now there's 5 police vacancies. So the Mark's method was to move the vacancy rate specifically for police within the police budget to keep it side by side with the actual salary expenditure to show what's being kind of netted out there. And so the amount that is being taken out is $312,500 to cover 3 police officers. Keeps it, like I said, keeps it close to the expenditure line for better visibility. One thing that we've learned recently is that the hiring process is super long for PD because we have a very extensive hiring process with our police commission and our PD. Requires multiple exams, multiple interview steps, background checks, and more. I believe we just hired an officer.
We did.
Congratulations. And so this vacancy rate accounts for the out of the 5, the chance of hiring 3 this year is 0 to nil. I'm not sure how I was going to refer to that, but and these were all positions approved in a prior budget that we fought for on the Board of Selectmen, and the PD and Police Commission have fought for. So the vacancy rate is there. The other question that's come up, doesn't that create a cliff? As of now, the anticipated need will continue into year 27-28 because of upcoming retirements. And when we ask questions, I'll defer to Nick and Mark on this. But for the next 2 years, we see this holding steady, and that and I guess the worst, if it comes to the point where we're creating a cliff here, then that's when we would have to review looking at positions. The other big change or item here is the Economic Development Fund. And again, we had a lot of conversations and prioritization here between the board and the town manager. So the way Mark managed this was after doing the zero-based budgeting at the library, they determined that the Business Resource Center position could manage as a half-time position. And Mark's just asked the board to take that half position, move it to his office, rather than hiring a full-time position. And actually, if this did not happen, it would be a potential cut to a union position, and it's a valued staff member that has really done well for the town. So he made the case to the board that the current staff he has does not have capacity for this added function, and is asking for a half a resource to keep half at the library and to have the person work for Mark. We have asked for a job description to understand the current staff workload, and how that works out to what this person will do. And the plan is to present it at an upcoming personnel subcommittee meeting. I was told it's not gonna be Thursday, but we're hoping that it would be at our April meeting to see what this looks like and also where the capacity exists in his office or doesn't exist to make this work. On the Board of Selectmen side, we felt that we did not want to cut the funding for Main Street, which was partially how Mark was looking to fund this. So this is our decision. We have an MOU with Main Street that's in the third year of a 3-year MOU that does talk about the $85,000 that we give them a year. We didn't feel that we could cut it at this point in time. But one thing that we did ask is we have put the charge to Mark, the town manager, that he will leverage Main Street as best as possible with this new position and come up with a strategy how to interconnect all these components, which we have many pieces here. And instead of having siloed activities, the hope is that, and the promise is that these will work together to help increase our grant list. And then as far as the library budget goes, they deployed zero-based budgeting for the first time this year. And as Mark has touted before, that zero-based budgeting will be used on a rotating basis. I believe Tom Roy's up on deck for next year.
He's excited.
And then as we get to questions, I will let Mark and Lisa or whoever weigh in on some of the year's processes that we didn't get into this much detail when we met during our budget. And then next steps are the public hearing on April 7th, potential public hearing on April 21st, and then the referendum. Plus we'll be working on a mailer as we have every year. I think that's all I have, and I'm ready for questions with the team that's here.
So thank you, Wendy, for that presentation. It was very helpful. I recognize the Board of Selectmen for initiating zero-based budgeting, something our board has asked for many years, and we do appreciate the initiative. You can anticipate some questions, I'm sure, on that as we go forward. But I do wanna again open it up to questions for the board, and starting with Art again, so I don't forget to call on you. Art, if you wanna lead us.
I appreciate that, Chair. Question for you guys is sort of, I'm a math nerd, so I like the mill rate hitting a 2.15, but Board of Ed was 2.79, and I think Board of Selectmen was like 3+% on expenditures.
Yep.
How did we get to 215 on the mill rate? Like, what something counterbalanced that? Was it even though it was small, the grand list grew enough that counterbalanced it? How should I think about how we got to 215?
Source of funding.
Sure.
And if you need to take that away and just like, I'm sure the math works, it just, you get my point. It's a little weird to say 2.8 and 3+ and then you end up at 2.15.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's a combination of the mill rate increase and the, so
The grand list, you mean?
what do you say?
The grand list.
You meant grand list. I assume.
Did you mean mill rate increase or grand list increase?
So part of it is the grand list increase that's offsetting. And then even though the Board of Ed came in at 279 and the town came in at that 339, our gross expenditures with the decrease in the debt service is only 2.34. So that offset with or it's actually like 2.88 net of revenue. So that offset with the grand list. Oops. I'm just trying to look at the chart as I go through.
Maybe was some of this because you're using capital reserves from the operating budget? So that would,
So the capital reserves come in under the anticipated revenue, and the anticipated revenue actually decreases about 219,000. So I mean, it's really your net expenditures of the 2.88 and then the $1 million in the grand list growth that gets us to the 2.15. Because nothing else changed. Our supplemental auto was the same, our rebates are the same. So it really is just the motor vehicle, which is the same as last year, the 32.46, and then the rest of it is your property taxes, so that would be your grand list growth.
Amy, I think you said capital reserves, how much of capital reserves is supporting the operating budget at this point?
1.6, I believe. It's the 900,000. I can look it up.
I think the 900,000 is the debt smoothing, debt service smoothing from before, and the difference is the attributed to the phase out of CNR, I believe.
I think I have 634.
I think there's also 200,000 coming from healthcare reserves to offset part of the increase from
Just from capital reserves
from
is the
capital.
question.
200 from SBA.
Right.
SBA.
Hold on, I'm not connecting.
Oh, it's the ambulance, so it's the ambulance, so is it the 710?
I think that's the right number.
Yep.
Yes, it's the 710, which is the small capital, plus the 900,000. So what's that total, 1.6?
She did.
So that's money that does not impact the mill rate,
Correct.
and that's new. We have not used capital reserves to support capital in the operating budget. We've used it to support it in the capital budget, right?
Right. The only other time we used it is when we offset the police expenditures with the ARPA funding, and then we transferred in the capital reserves. That's the only other time that we did that.
I think we used it for the ambulance last year too, did we not? Or did we use it?
No,
No, we
that
used
was
opioid.
opioid.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Alright, sorry for interrupting. You wanna continue?
Yeah, so another question, and I appreciate, trying to get the vacancies right and sort of have that come through. I guess as you guys think about it, it seems like it's a large number of police vacancies this year, if I read you right. And so what are we prepared, and it's a tricky one, but like, what are we prepared to do if we did go faster than we thought? Like, so I think like two issues come to mind for me. Like, what if we went faster? Would we literally say, we're gonna make sure we end the year with 2 vacancies just to make sure we hit our budget? And I guess the second one is, it feels like a temporary type thing to use those vacancies because it seems like a weird year. Is that save going against something else that's temporary, or are we creating an issue for ourselves because we're gonna have to fill in that hole next year because we're kind of using a non-durable save to cover a durable expense?
Yeah, Art, Wendy asked me to take that. It's a great question. I think that what, the town has done historically is have a vacancy factor applied to the overall budget. And as you can see, what we're doing is breaking out police because the analysis is clear that the hiring timeline for police is significantly longer than any of the others. So rather than a blended overall vacancy rate that the town has deployed in the past, we're breaking out police. And our estimation is that there's approximately an 8-month hiring line, right? The timeline is about 8 months to get the new officer. Could be longer, could be less, but that's a good sort of blended rate in terms of how long it takes us to get there. We currently have 5 vacancies. And what we did for the first time this year was we went back and we looked at what's the earliest possible retirement date for officers that are here. Not officers that could retire now but haven't chosen to, but first time eligibility was of interest to us. And also we factored in anybody who had self-identified to HR or to the chief that they were likely to retire in the fiscal year. And we put all that together and we came up with a range. It's going to be in the next fiscal year between 2 and 4 new departures. So we said 3 departures. Add to that the 5 vacancies that we have. We looked at the timeline that we've got and estimated that we may be able to fill 2 of those before the end of the fiscal year. As the chief just indicated, we hired one who was sworn in just last week and welcome him to the team. Probably another one, and we can talk more, if anybody's interested with respect to the timeline. I did circulate a memo on this earlier, just a couple of hours before the meeting. Apologies for the late email, providing board members with a little more background on this. Why do we think it's not a cliff? Well, number one, our estimate is based on an anticipated vacancy rate next year. And we believe that every year you can adjust the vacancy rate to account for that lag. And so you're always budgeting for the following years of vacancy. So it isn't really that challenging for us to tweak it every year as part of the budget process. And so we envision, Art, that we'll have the PD vacancy rate separate from the global one for at least a few years, and then just phase it out. I'm not an expert on this, but I will tell you that my experience has been that over the last few years, policing has been a very challenging environment from a recruiting perspective. I defer to the chief and the police commission on this. I know it's something that we wrestle with. I won't say that we've never been fully staffed, and I won't say that we don't hope to be fully staffed. I try to stay away from that. But the reality is that over the last few years, our police vacancy factor has contributed to the year-end surplus. And so one of the things that we did as part of the budget was we looked at things that were contributing to that surplus, and we see that police vacancy was part of it. I hope that answers your question, Art.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I'm worried about a cliff, basically. I'm worried about like banking on this and then it goes away. It seems like you guys have done your homework to feel good that it's pretty predictable for the year and you're not creating a cliff. Like that's what,
Yep.
Again, I just think durable should go against durable, right? Like I don't like when we do it non-durable against the durable. That's when you end up with a problem of an expense and a source. So,
Yep.
But it sounds like you guys feel comfortable that you're not going to create a hiccup and at some point it'll actually grade back to the broader factor.
I think so. I just give you a little bit more comfort on this and say that it is an area that management has some control over also. So, when we begin that recruitment and the speed with which we're doing it, there is some control. So we are actually in a position of controlling our destiny to a certain extent on what this timeline is.
I'd like to underline a specific question Art had, and I think it plays into exactly what you were just setting up, which is control.
Yeah, we control.
We hire 3, we've got 5 vacancies, we don't have the budget to hire the 4th. And so we're gonna not hire the 4th? Is that the way we would control that?
That's exactly how we would control it. We don't expect that would happen because of the 8-month lag,
Sure.
but we're
Simsbury is a great place to work.
right. It really is.
We've only got room for 3 this year.
Right, and I think we got a very good question too from our staff internally, and do you want to cut a position? And that's another way to achieve this, and the answer there was no. Our colleagues on the police commission, the police command, and everything else, our unions, of course, and we didn't think too, and I think we were right. I don't want to speak for the Board of Selectmen, but there wasn't an appetite to cut the public safety, and we're also very cognizant of the effect on overtime of having so many vacancies. If we hadn't just hired that one that the chief mentioned, we'd be at 6. 3 or 4 is where we've been historically since I've been here. So if you look back in time, it's 3 or 4 is kind of where we've been.
You just touched on something I wanted to ask about, because I understand more so than in other aspects of town government, vacancies on the police department create additional operational expenses.
We do.
And is that something that you factored into the calculation when you've also assumed this vacancy?
We absolutely did, and it's a great point. I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe Amy will, but I think just recently we were over budget on snow and overtime for DPW, and the transfer came and was approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and I think the transfer was generated from police. Am I right about that? So even in the current fiscal year, we had capacity, and that money was used to, with your permission, to transfer to cover extra costs on snow and snow removal and salt. So we've looked at this very hard. I want to thank the Police Commission and particularly Chief Bolter for working with us to deploy this in police. To the first Selectman's point, I would just ask the board also to take notice of the fact that for the first time, we're displaying the vacancy rate in the department that it is applied to, so that taxpayers can see this is what was budgeted and this is the contra.
That's something else I wanted to ask, because obviously we have in the past, as you said, assumed a blended vacancy rate, which is appropriate. It's something that this board asked for repeatedly. But now that you've broken out some police vacancies and you've separated from vacancies in other parts of the town, how does the total assumption of vacancy rate compare, say, with last year's blended rate?
Great question. So
Reduced, though. It
we
was reduced this
reduced
year.
it simultaneously with the breakout for exactly the reason I think you're alluding to in your question is that it would, because police was contributing the most essentially to that vacancy factor. If you're gonna peel it out, you do need to make an adjustment on the global vacancy factor to compensate for that. And so what we did was, I won't call it zero-based budgeting, Bert, but what we did was we looked at all the other vacancies and averaged out the timeline to fill those positions and then reduced the factor. And I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but we did make that adjustment to your point.
It took out
I'm not
80K.
I'm not sure you answered my question, which is how, if in the current budget, you've got a number for vacancies for the police department, vacancies for the rest of the town. If you add the two of them together, how does that compare with the vacancy assumption we made last year for the town overall?
It's higher. I'd have to get back to you on the dollar amount of that.
That's, yeah, I'd really like to know that.
And I understand the question now, and thank you for that. I don't know the total, Amy might be able to work that, but we've seen an elongation of the hiring timeline in PD, even as the number of vacancies have increased. We also, and this is a little bit of a finer point on this, we do see some systemic issues in areas of collective bargaining and others that may contribute to departures moving forward. And I'm happy to share, outside the budget context, some issues relating to collective bargaining that I think could adversely impact retention. But my point for the board's consideration today is that anything outside we're talking about is operating to increase the vacancy factor, not decrease it. So we think our estimate is conservative based on everything we know.
So I have a follow-up question to what Regina asked, in terms of the vacancy rate in the police. What is the police commission comfortable with as far as their headcount is concerned?
I think I'll defer to Jen and the chief on this. I think the number of positions, as the first selectman said, gradually increased. I think the last time it was increased was a few years ago. And that they're comfortable with the level now. Jenna, do you wanna?
I mean, no, I do believe we need more officers, quite frankly. We had a CERTA study that the Board of Selectmen funded to evaluate based on our 2022 data, and it showed we need more officers than we're currently allotted. So the thought of us finding qualified candidates and then not being able to fulfill them because we had already hired 3 is not great.
How many more would you need?
The CERTA had us at,
Yeah, the CERTA report had us at 1 or 2 more than we are currently funded for. And again, that was based on 2022 data, not anticipating some of the growth that we have seen here.
I'm very, so I'm the daughter-in-law of a police officer and have been for 30 years, so this is my life. And I'm very impressed with the hiring process that Simsbury follows, because I've been watching this since I was 19. And so I totally understand that there is a long lag, as there should be, if you really want good police officers, as there should be. But I also, having lived in Simsbury, feel that that lag is going to get fixed and will become efficient over time. And so when do you think that you could be in a position to get your wish of the additional 2 officers?
Well, I can speak to getting to the number that we have been allotted right now first. And it's been kind of a backwards process for us compared to other jurisdictions and nationwide. So 2020 to 2024 or so, it was very difficult to hire police officers, and there was an exodus from the profession, and it was very difficult. We were able to maintain that, so we didn't have the 10, 15, 25% departures and vacancies like a lot of other departments did. And we were holding strong until last year. And last year it was sort of a culmination of a couple different issues that had nothing to do with what we were experiencing in the field from 2020 till now. It was 2 departures from the department after some injuries that prevented them from continuing to be able to do the job. 1 retirement and 1 person who after 5 years decided to move back down to the south where they were from. So we find ourselves in a kind of a strange position now. Throw on top of that and some anticipated vacancies next year. That's sort of why we're in this kind of strange position. I agree with you that I see this turning around. We have never in our history hired 8 people in a 12 to 15 month time period. And with our selection process being probably somewhat longer than others, and I will tell you definitely much more selective than others and other professions. It will take a little bit of time to catch up. Are we looking to go full steam ahead to fill them all? Yes, we absolutely are, and I would love to see the additional 1 or 2 officers, because we haven't been able to do some of the things that we really want to. We have not been able to have a dedicated traffic officer. We had that for years, and that's one of the first things that gets pulled, because the other officers working the patrol district have those responsibilities as well, but they get pulled for emergencies and for other calls and for investigations. We have not been able to fill our detective division, because then that's a second place where we pull. So we've had those 2 vacancies within, and as our needs grow throughout town and our the breadth of our operation increases, we find ourselves doing other things that take up a lot more time as well. So I mean, a big thing for us is quality of life issues, and we work very closely with social services and the schools, and we feel like our school district is a district of its own. Like, we assign an officer to the north end of town, we assign an officer to the school. I mean, there's thousands of people that are interacting there on a daily basis. So long way to get to your answer, or to your question. I see it taking a little bit of time. I think our numbers are very accurate on that we will have, for the next year or so anyways, overall 3 vacancies. I don't want that to happen, but I don't see a massive ability to hire, because the pool is just not there in the length of time it takes.
So do you think it would be fair to say that in 2 years you might be able to hire the additional 1 or 2?
Yes, I think that would be fair to say, sort of looking at projected retirees or those who are eligible to retire after that. I mean, we have a couple people who are eligible to retire. We did not expect the last 3 that we had leave. Like I said, two were completely unexpected, and or actually the 3rd one was unexpected too, to return to his home state. But yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Thank you.
2 years to get to full staffing, I mean, is that what you said?
I'm hoping.
Optimistic.
Yeah, I'm hoping a lot less time than that.
less than 2 years?
Yeah, I'm hoping, but we do know that there are, 2 to 4 people who have indicated that they may retire within this next calendar year.
So what do you view as sort of a normal vacancy rate on the police force? Do you always have one opening because someone retires?
We have, over the last sort of 5 years or so, anyways, we have had roughly 2. Maybe not all at the same time, but 2 vacancies, sure. When we were allowed to get to number 42, we were not able to fill that. We were so very close. We were at 41 and then things happened. No, like I said, I really hope we get there sooner than later. It's just the reality is that we're gonna have
But
some,
based on what the town manager said, you won't, because those will be baked into the budget.
yes.
So anyone else on vacancies? I've got a couple.
Yeah.
Just to respond to Bert's question, the overall vacancy rate increased 232,500.
I'm sorry, what?
The overall vacancy rate with the police and the general vacancy rate, if you will, compared to last year, increased 232,500.
I mean,
So
we should
total
be,
amount?
we should be clear about what's
Six,
at
seven?
stake here, because it's an issue that's gonna come up again in these discussions, which is, we're not doubting that you're accurately predicting the vacancies that are going to occur in the next year. The question is, if we really want to have to fill all those vacancies, if that's what we think the town should be doing, do we want to bake into this budget an imbalance that's going to require us to increase rates next year, or do we want to take the risk of running a surplus in this area, which can be applied to anticipated expenses in future years, and smooth out the tax rates over the couple of years? And that's part of this issue. We don't have to resolve it in this limited discussion, but everyone should be clear that that's part of what we're talking about.
I would just chime in and add to the other thing that we looked at carefully was the police overtime line, which obviously is very concerning. The Board of Selectmen brought that up in our budget workshops, and the chief has worked those numbers with command, and it's as you said, it does have an impact. The vacancies have an impact. It's not dollar for dollar, as we know, but you start to you worry about the overtime, but you also worry about staff morale. And the key metric for me and everybody associated with policing knows that, we can mandate our officers to come in when we get to minimum staffing, and these are mandates. One of the things I hate to ask my chief of police is how often are we mandating? And as that number and data point goes up, you start to realize that there is an intangible, non-fiscal impact on your department, on the job as a whole. And so for us, it's not just the budget number. As you said, Bert, we are confident that this is a non-cliff producing number. We'll have to be adjusted every year, but we are also looking at overtime and the overall impacts of this many vacancies on the job.
Yeah, that's crucial.
It's important. And if we think that these vacancies are a problem that we want to address urgently,
right?
Given understanding that there's an 8-month lag and all that,
absolutely,
that makes me hesitant to budget for it. Budget for a problem that we're hoping to solve as soon as possible.
And it's very good, and not to belabor it, I know we're over on time, but one of the things that the chief and I talked about was the counterpoint to this is, do our policymakers want to think about budgeting for incentives or other things to sweeten the pot and quicken the timeline for recruitment? There are things that we could do in the area of compensation and benefits and so forth, even going so far as, signing bonuses and things, and we are not at that point yet, so.
So if we could just stay focused on the vacancy rate, we can talk about way to fix the other problems for it. So the vacancy rate, as I see it, Amy, is the 325 in the police budget, but there's also 75% budgeted for the police vacancy in the benefits, is that correct?
Oh, yes, that actually changes my number, hold on.
So the difference from last year, we had a 350 vacancy, we reduced some of the town side, but the net would be about 670, so 240 plus the 400. We think we want to fill the vacancies, and we saw with Glastonbury, they budget a vacancy rate, and they didn't think they were gonna be able to fill them, and now they're at full staffing, and they're dealing this year with a fiscal cliff because they were able to fill it. Their fiscal cliff was 200, we're proposing a 400 cliff. I just wanna begin by acknowledging something important that the town manager, raised a legitimate concern about transparency and budgeting the vacancy rate, so I do appreciate that, and that's not in dispute at all. We agree on those facts, but to Art's point about the durability, so when you have a normal vacancy rate year over year, that's okay to budget over time because it's consistent, it happens every year, you're not creating any cliffs every year, you're gonna have two. If you have an unusually high vacancy rate, that's what both Art and I think Bert were getting to, you have the potential of creating a cliff, and the way I explained it to my hairdresser earlier today, it's like imagine your employer tells you, hey, you're getting a bonus this year. Awesome. Don't count on it, you're not getting it next year. It would be inadvisable to apply that bonus to pay your electricity bill because that happens year over year. Next year, you're not gonna be there. So the idea when you have that one-time extra dollars, like we're having for this one-time unusual vacancy in the police, would be to put it to Art's point when he says durable, to budget something that is one time. You have a one-time vacancy rate savings, you can fill that hole with a one-time capital expense. When that one-time capital expense goes away, and now you can fill full staffing, you haven't created a fiscal cliff for the community. What you don't wanna do is so again, going back to the house, you use your bonus to pay the electric bill, but when the bonus stops, the electric bill is there and the roof still needs fixing. So that's the situation we're looking to avoid and where I have some concerns there, especially knowing that 2 is our norm, that you think is reasonable and we're at 3. And the commission thinks we actually need to be higher than that. So I do worry about a cliff in that area. When I wanna talk about sort of what we had been doing, I understand the town manager wanting to budget that vacancy rate, but by not budgeting the vacancy rate, what happened was there was excess surplus, right, in the budget. That surplus was not wasted or spent on fund to haves. That surplus was then put into capital reserves and the next year it was budgeted transparently through that. With the proposal, what we're doing is we're creating this cliff that we know is gonna come, whether it's 400, 300, 200, could come as early as 1 year. When we know how tough it was for you guys to get to this number, you're building in a cliff that you're gonna have to accommodate 1 year out to 2 years out. At a time when the police commission not only wants to get to normal levels, they wanna get to a higher level. So to me, that creates a risk for the town, and that's something I'm gonna be thinking about in the next 2 weeks.
If I could share just.
Mark, if you could please wait.
Normal historical staffing levels, not a normal staffing.
Right, historical. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that if they said they didn't need, the extra headcount, we could think about it, but we need it. And it's an important line item, public safety. And especially, policing as I see it is getting more complicated. With all of the new things that we're experiencing globally, we never thought a virus on the other side of the planet would shut us down. But that's the world we live in now.
I mean, I guess the solution there is hard because fixing this cliff that we have here would mean one of 2 things. You could do cuts elsewhere and budget in the capital so that you don't create the fiscal cliff there, but the mill rate goes up. The math is the math. And so I think that leaves us in a difficult situation. In terms of reducing the cliff, Amy, if you could pull up the mill rate worksheet. If we only did 2 vacancies, what would that do to the mill rate? It's true we might run the risk of having excess surplus, but if we think there's definitely gonna be 3 vacancies, you would do 2 vacancies and 1 capital project. So that next year you're back to the 2 vacancies and we haven't created the cliff. That would cause an increased mill rate, but what would that be? And that would protect the police commission and the vacancies, because effectively what we're saying is you're gonna be down 3 officers for the next 2 years. I don't know what 400 divided by 3 is.
133. What is it? 133, 233.
Wait, can you, what would the taxes be before you do that, and what will the taxes be after?
Alright. It would be we're at the 224, was where we started.
She's counting benefits, so the 312 plus the 75. So that's 129 a person. So it's the 215 that was presented as current, and then if we did, what did I say it was? 130, we'll
You
say.
could just add a third of 400,000 to the Board of Selectmen operating budget.
It goes to 227.
What would it be?
227, 2.27.
No, I'm
So
sorry,
that's
the
one
dollar.
additional person?
No, the dollar amount on taxes, the difference in taxes that people would pay between those 2 scenarios.
So that's the 224. It's the 236, so it would be $12.
So, I mean, we could take care of a concern of the police commission, at least get you to your normal vacancy rate too, for a difference of how much, $12? $1 a month? And we'd avoid a fiscal cliff. We could take care of a one-time capital, if you think 2 is your norm. I don't know.
Yeah, 2 has been the basic norm if you look at over, an 8 or so year period, yes.
But to Mark's point, it would take care of the transparency problem because you would be budgeting it.
I would just say that the 2 things. The 2 that's been the norm has been the norm against 3 or 4 positions and not 6 or 7, right? So we have an unusually high actual vacancy rate. It is unreasonable to assess, with all respect to the chief and the police commission, it's unreasonable because what you're saying is that it's always been 2, we're gonna leave it 2. When the whole point is that it has been increasing and the timeline to hire is longer, it's number 1. But if I may, Chair, briefly, number 2, I think the main point I would make is that influencing our decision by the police commission's want or desire to add 2 new positions, to increase headcount by 2, which has not been something that's been raised to the Board of Selectmen and wasn't in the town manager budget, with all respect to the police commission. It's like now they say that they want an additional 2 officers.
We're just talking about the vacancy, if we could keep the conversation on the vacancy rate.
Yeah, I
So the
think
vac-
That wasn't what we asked.
Right, but I think what Dr. Shivaswamy was trying to pressure test was looking into the future at a point where we do find 4 qualified candidates who are excited to join our police force, and what sort of pressure are we gonna be putting on us to turn away a qualified candidate if we're making deliberate decisions in the budget not to have enough money for them. If that's not actually the conversation we wanna have in 8 months, 9 months, then I'm just not understanding the logic of making a vacancy budgeting decision that
So-
assumes that.
2 things there, and then we'll open it up to further questions there. There are 2 problems to solve, and if we could just not talk about adding new officers above what is authorized, but just getting to our vacancy rate. Budget a normal vacancy rate. Mark just mentioned that we have an unusually high vacancy rate. So instead of budgeting that and not using it for capital, which we've heard there's a huge capital need, you budget 2 and you budget a one-time capital project to fill that gap. Once those officers are filled, that capital project goes away and we flatlined the expense and haven't created a fiscal cliff for our taxpayers. I think that's something we should consider for $1 a month. It would give you the flexibility. Otherwise, you're not hiring 3 officers each year. The scenario I'm proposing for $1 a month, you could bring your hiring up to 2 officers per year if you have the ability to do that. And to Mark's point, because you don't have the ability to do that, in the time frame when you don't have the ability, you budget the capital to cover the gap. When you do, that capital goes away. It's a one-time capital expense, disappears once you hit your vacancy. I think this board should consider it. We don't have to decide that tonight. But if there's any other questions on the vacancy rate, we'll move on to the next topic.
No, I think that's right, but to be clear, what you're proposing is adding a capital expenditure to the budget that you're taxing for, which would be the equivalent of one of the 3 vacancies.
Yes.
We're not putting ourselves in the position where we're asking the police force to create a fiscal crisis for us as quickly as possible by hiring qualified officers.
And the other thing it gives you the flexibility is, say we become like Glastonbury and we've got the capital in the budget, we've already budgeted for it. You say, oh my goodness, we can actually fill more than we thought. You can make a administrative decision not to do the capital and fill the police officer, and you haven't created a cliff, you haven't created a budget amendment that increases the overall taxes. It would give you the flexibility to adjust as increased hiring. So that's just something to think about. We don't have to decide it today. All right, if the board is ready, we'll move on to other topics of conversation.
Yeah, and I just wanna say that I know I brought this up, but I do think that, I'm hearing the other side of this too, though, that this is an odd year, and if you do it smart, you could do it so that you don't create a cliff and you sort of grade yourself back. It also avoids us overtaxing, right? So I think that's the dilemma here, is how do you balance that out, I think, to your point, Lisa.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good compromise, with the overtaxing concern that Mark has. The staffing of public safety that, we all have, everyone here has. And this is probably
And meeting
a better,
a capital need.
Yeah, so, and it's $1 a month, I think we can manage that.
We should at least think about it when we get to April. Okay. Are there other issues folks want to raise at this point? Regina?
So the Board of Ed gave a great presentation before, and they structured it really similarly to this one. Hey, we have this budget, we did all this work, we got close to the number. There was a surprise on the health insurance. What the Board of Ed team did was gathered around and tried to get down to closer to the number. And it looks like they did some really hard work. There's at least 3 FTE roles that are disappearing. Sounds like there were at least some compromises made on classroom sizes. What was the similar step for the Board of Selectmen working with the town budget?
Great question. We had already gone to the
Mark, just a minute, that was addressed to the first selectman.
Yeah, I was gonna, we actually did not, we did not.
Any reason why?
Didn't learn of the health insurance till late in the game, and we just kind of ate it, I guess, is what I would say.
Seeing that the Board of Education took a different approach, change any of that thinking?
I didn't know they took a different approach, so I'm just gonna put that out there.
Sure.
They used their non-lapsing fund to fund other things that they were able to do that we don't have.
Some of it, they didn't cover all of that from the non-lapsing fund though.
Fine.
They looked at head count, they looked at some of the metrics they were using, class sizes. Looks like there were at least some programs that they made adjustments to.
Yeah, and I don't have insight into the Board of Ed budget to know what's going on in there, so.
And I wouldn't expect you to.
Yeah.
But for the town budget, there was no opportunity or is no opportunity to do a similar thing to get closer to the Board of Finance guidance?
We could have tried to get lower in our budget meetings, and we didn't see anywhere where we were going to make any difficult cuts that were gonna impact the budget and not hurt services.
Now that you've seen the Board of Education budget, would that approach change at your end, or do you think that you would continue down the continue to hold the guidance that you have at this point? It's for either one.
I don't see a lot of room to move in our budget and to make cuts. We did not see that presented to us during our presentation. We felt that Mark came in trying very hard to get to the guidance of the Board of Ed and tasked his department heads to get him there. I think some of it was painful to the department heads, from what we heard during the budget workshops. So we deferred to town staff on their needs and we left it at that.
Fair enough.
And I would just add, if I may, two things. If you're looking to make some last minute cuts in response to bad news that you get at the 11th hour, it's somewhat easier to do that when you've got a $90 million budget as opposed to a $30 million budget. So there are more line items with which you can cut. I think that's a fair assessment. The second thing I would say is that with great deference to my colleagues at the Board of Ed, a good amount of their ability to get to the guidance was the elimination of vacant positions, as I think somebody on your board mentioned, not positions that were filled. What we did was we as you see, we tried to do the analysis of the vacancy rate. We looked for cuts across the organization. And by the time we got to the Board of Selectmen, there wasn't an opportunity to go back. The Board of Ed was running about 3 weeks ahead of us on the timeline. And so, Matt was able to go back to the Board of Ed at the 11th hour and say, are there any other things we could do? Of that 400,000 that they were wrestling with at the 11th hour, 200 of it was non-lapsing. So roughly 50% of it, I believe, was non-lapsing. And I think the others were vacant position cuts. I'm not.
So if we're talking about the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I just wanna add one, we did have quite a big discussion on the zero-based budgeting on the library, reducing the business resource person to a half a person and to transfer a half a person to the town manager's office. If you go back and watch the tape, there was a good discussion on how to justify that. Some of the conversation was, this is a really treasured resource of the library and somebody that the town did not wanna lose on staff. And that in order to keep that person who is a union member from being cut fully, Mark was asking to fund half their position in another place. That was the only potential position that came up to us that we were asked for a dispatcher, which we could not put into the budget. So we didn't, that was another ask. We did not pursue that ask because it came later in the day and we had already funded this position. So there was other needs that we did not address, but that was the one place where we talked about potentially cutting the position. We heard the arguments from Mark and staff and we kept the board, we all agreed to keep the position in.
If I may, Chair, just very
Can we, well, if you could wait to be recognized, that would be great. Thank you. Alright, so Wendy, just to follow up on that.
Sure.
So any one of these things might be okay, but they start to accumulate. And so what I see in this budget, first of all, there was conversation about maybe hiring a dispatch mid-year at your thing.
Yep.
So, and a dispatch position is about 100, 150, I don't know.
It's around 100 with benefits.
100, okay. So what I see is a police vacancy savings of $400,000. That's gonna be some gap that's gonna need to be filled, whether it's next year or the year after. The Farmington Valley ambulance, their operating expense is about $160. Right now that's being done with capital reserves. If that becomes an ongoing expense.
That's the last year of the MOU.
Yeah, and in talking with the first selectman, she had indicated she anticipated it would become an ongoing.
Not to that extent.
Well,
yes.
If I could just finish.
Sure.
Thank you. So if it's 160 or even 100, whatever it is, but 160 there that is not being funded with the operating budget that does need to come into the operating budget. We are trying to solve for the problem of capital by increasing taxes and capital. And we've actually cut capital by $280,000. So if we're gonna do squadron, that needs to come back in because we have to build up our cash for capital. If we hire a potential dispatch position, even if you do it mid-year and it's at half salary, that's a gap of $100,000. We've cut legal fees, $39,000, but we know the litigation is coming. So that's a gap there. When you add all that up, that's a gap that needs to be filled of $980,000. And so I am a little bit concerned about how we're gonna make that up over time, given the amount of dollars we're gonna have to pay just on our biggest expense, which are salaries and benefits. How do you work that in, given the grand list projections? I think that's something we need to think about. That's a big number that we're gonna have to overcome. That's part of the reason I think I was jumping on Art's suggestion about durable to durable. How can we get that gap down a little bit for $1 a year? We could help with the police take care of some of that capital. So that's what I'm seeing there. Does anyone else wanna speak to that? Or
Well, I'm just going to piggyback of what Regina was saying and then what you were saying, which is it appears that these surprises are becoming our new normal because it's gonna happen year over year because of the healthcare component of it, just by it. So I think it's probably a good idea to look into a methodology because this is going to be our future. To start thinking about looking at our line items and seeing what we can take out because the healthcare benefits, the healthcare cost is what it is. And year over year, we're going to get an 11th hour shock that, we're not in a position to absorb, just because of the way Mark articulated it, which is, if you have a $30 million budget, how do you cut from there? As opposed to a $91 million budget that has more line items that you can look at. So the methodology of looking into this very seriously is probably something we should start looking at right away because we're going to have this year after year just given the information we know now.
If I may, Chair.
Mark.
Thank you for recognizing me. We talk a lot about a cliff and that's obviously something that is very important. We don't want any cliffs. We've got, I think I used for the first time the term mountain that's coming. It's almost the opposite of this. And to your point, I was gonna say exactly the same thing. And I'll give you by way of example. Amy and this board worked hard a couple of years ago to come up with a debt service smoothing plan. That's the 900 that you're seeing in there, and we're in the third year of that. It made such good sense for the Board of Finance and the Finance Director to come up with that debt smoothing because it smoothed out the peaks and valleys. What we're seeing now, and to your point about creating a methodology to deal with this, suggests to me that we might want to consider the same tactic with respect to smoothing out healthcare increases because what happened this year could happen again. That is a mountain because we don't have any control over it. And to Art's point, with respect to the police vacancy factor, we at least have some control. We could slow the hiring process, not that we want to. But with respect to healthcare costs, we actually have zero control. And every time that comes in higher than anticipated, we're either using reserves or we're gonna try to put it in and impact the mill rate. And my understanding of what we've done here is that we've used 200,000 in reserves to mitigate this increase of say 500,000 or so, and the rest is hitting the general fund. And so I would suggest to the board, not now, but down the road, if the chair is so inclined, to look and work with Amy to come up with a similar plan to debt service smoothing to smooth out the shocks. But what happened here, and the superintendent spoke to it earlier, is with 3 days to go, Lockton told us it's X dollars. And at that point, we were like an airliner, on a crash course. We were too close to the ground at that point with the deadline to pull up. It was either asked to use more healthcare reserves to mitigate this. If we were using healthcare reserves, then obviously that would be, I think, beneficial to our taxpayers. But we're eating a lot of that and it was very difficult. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. And the other thing to do is to look at the healthcare we offer, of like businesses do, and look at the benefits and work with our unions and talk with them about what we can afford. So that would be the other option.
And I'm sure that's not easy, and I absolutely take the point that a $90 million budget has more options than a $30 million budget. The critique was not that you were not able to get to the same dollar value of budget cuts. I understand that there was a very short timeline. I think what I'm taking away from it is it did not occur to the team working this that the guidance given by the Board of Finance was meant to be durable and still be our guidance even if there was a last minute shock. And there does not seem to have been any serious discussion about, even though it was last minute and the cuts were painful or the discussions would be rushed, an attempt to try to get there. For me personally, I would have a much different reaction to the story right now. There was a slide that was saying, hey, we got together. These are the 5 things we talked about. We didn't think they were good ideas at the budget workshop. They still weren't good ideas, but we really pushed and we tried, and this is still. It doesn't seem like it occurred that there were other options to consider along that line. There were only options that were to absorb it and add that to this budget. And I would request that in the future, the guidance from the Board of Finance is durable, even if there's a last minute shock. To Dr. Shivaswamy's point, that is what we're gonna see.
I would just correct one thing. In my recollection about the capital expenditure plan was that Melissa was also one of the architects of that plan and should get credit for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, the thing about the capital plan that I think is worth noting, and I do appreciate all the work staff did in putting it together, is we had a one-time spike in debt service. So this is not like healthcare, which is gonna keep going like this. It was literally a one-time spike. And we put dollars aside to plan for that spike as part of our debt service funding. It's called planning your debt. And so what it does is doesn't give a shock, spike in taxes, dip in taxes. It smooths it out over time, and it was pre-funded. So it wasn't dependent on other things. So I think healthcare is a different conversation, but I agree with Mark, we can look at all sorts of solutions on that end.
Yeah, that's a really important discussion going forward. It's going to get more difficult over time.
Are we ready to move on to another topic?
Yeah.
So I do wanna go to the library because we did get a number of emails on that and a few questions came up. Do we have a job description for the economic development part-time position with the town manager?
We've asked for it and we were promised that we will get one at an upcoming personnel meeting.
So do
Subcommittee
we know
meeting.
what sort of, what does success look like? We're gonna do this position and success looks like what? What are the metrics we're doing for this?
Well, I don't have all the metrics. I will say that we have a more cohesive group working on economic development instead of the siloed groups that we have right now. We received the promise that Mark would engage Simsbury Main Street Partnership more and that this new resource would engage with Main Street Partnership, EDC and Chamber and Planning and Mark to help move that forward. Right now, people are pretty much working on their own.
But why can't the town manager do that already?
Well, we were presented that the resources in the town manager's office are full and not able to do it. To do some of the work that Mark had proposed, which he can speak to, which were mostly administrative in I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but we're administrative.
Lisa, question directly to the library director. Is this person not have enough to do at the library?
I think that's a fallacy that's out there. She absolutely has enough to do. We were asked to make efficiencies, so there will be certainly things that will not happen anymore. Programming will decrease. Her availability to the job seekers, entrepreneurs, the businesses in the community from the library side, whereas training and things like that, they just won't be there anymore.
Is that not economic development?
That is truly economic development, but in a different way.
I do what?
So we're gonna increase economic development in one area and decrease it in another, and do we have metrics to look at, is this the right way to go?
Can I just add one?
Yeah.
Just cause I'm the one who's been on the board the longest. This was a position that was left unfilled for over 2 years. that we had proposed cutting in multiple budgets. But the library made the case and we did not cut it. And so it was filled during the period that Lee Erdman was here. So that we did not cut the position. So from my perspective, reducing the position to a half a position felt in line with the past. If the workload had increased in the library on what the Business Resource Center had done, then I don't have those facts, but based on the prior years, it was a position that I said was left unfilled for multiple years.
Do you have metrics, Lisa, that you follow with the business resource?
Absolutely, but I think what I can speak to is it was unfilled for 2 years because it's a highly specialized position. It requires an MLIS, and you also need to have that background in business, in entrepreneurship, so it's hard to find the right candidate to fill it. So that's why it wasn't filled. We found the right candidate and we filled it. And just because it wasn't filled didn't mean that other staff wasn't trying to fill in for the time that this person sits on the information desk and helps the public directly. It doesn't count for the time that this person would have had office hours and dealt with the public directly. So it was a hardship to the library and it was a hardship to the community who did not have these services for 2 years.
So we have a position that is fully operational, that is serving economic development, and we're gonna swap it out for a position which we don't know what it's gonna do, and we have no plan? What am I missing?
Mark explained to the board, which we accepted, the need for this position to avoid firing a person.
No, if you could just tell us what the person will be doing.
Well, I will tell you what Mark told us the person would be doing, would be looking into applications for land that we're looking at. State land is one of the items that you had presented. What else did you talk about?
So this is an admin position, it's not, and it's obviously part-time. The incumbent at the library chair is the business development coordinator. It makes perfect sense. All we're doing is rejiggering what that individual does. To specifically answer your question, the person would be working out of my office and with George in planning and development to issue RFPs, RFEIs, to do research, to reach out to new businesses, to interact with our business community and find out what we can do to better support them. They would be working to help us draft a new abatement policy, which would provide us with incentives. Not saying to use them or not, just saying that putting tools in our tool chest, as other communities are doing, is something that we need to do. As the first selectman said, we don't have the bandwidth to do that administrative work, right? That's when you said, Chair, can the town manager do it? It's drafting documents, it's doing research. It's not a town manager role, it's an administrative role. So the idea was when we did zero-based budgeting at the library, obviously there's going to be cuts at the library that were painful, and the library board of trustees was involved in this process. We looked very seriously at another individual, and that position might have been laid off. In negotiations with the library board of trustees, it was felt that that particular action, as opposed to this action, would be much more deleterious to the library and to the citizens that use the library. And so in discussions with them, we arrived at a less bad outcome that would get us to where we needed to be. And so with all respect to the library board of trustees, you know, the alternative to this would have been much worse in terms of its impact to the library. And this was what we resolved and settled on. So it's, you know, and again, I'm very respectful of their role to come and advocate for perhaps putting it back. But to the first selectman's point, we're taking a full-time business development coordinator who reports to the library director. And we're saying, hold it, the Board of Selectmen in their goals and in my performance review has charged me with doing more for economic development, as the first selectman said. That's working with Main Street, but it's also having some command and control over internal resources, which I don't have currently. That individual works at the library and does the items for Lisa at the desk and other things and so forth. So the idea very quickly is to take that job description and tweak it. Half of the things that Lisa can do without are jettisoned, and the new duties are rolled in, and we have a blended shared position that would be half-time at the library and half-time working with George and I on specific tasks that we've identified as things that meet the Board of Selectmen's objectives for economic development. It's really just a reassignment of staff. We don't couch it on the management side, Chair, as being a new position at all. It's an existing incumbent whose work is being redeployed in furtherance of the Board of Selectmen's mission. That's all we're doing. It's cost neutral. It's really not a budget ask at all. I think the question became from the Board of Selectmen, why not eliminate the position?
Thank you.
I just,
who is the chief, do we have a chief administrative officer? Who is the chief administrative officer for the town?
We do not.
Mark is the chief executive and chief administrative officer.
I'm the chief executive officer.
Right. But you handle all administration.
I'm sorry,
of the town.
what's
That's
the-
what the,
Yeah.
yeah,
New person, I don't know what the difference between those two things are.
there's a chief executive, well, in this form of government, a town manager, mayor, council form of government, the town manager is the chief executive of the town, does all administrative work, all of staff reports to him. And he follows the policy of the Board of Selectmen and helps us implement that. A chief administrative officer is strictly administrative only with a mayor, town first selectman as the chief executive who directs the town manager and oversees all of the staff. That is the form of government we had in 2016.
Question is like, who does the work? So, I mean.
The town manager is the administrative lead of the town.
Right.
And
So
has a
there, so
staff.
I was just wondering, I thought your comment was kind of strange. You're the manager, you don't do the research. So I thought that was weird. But I just, if that's the way we have it, that's fine.
I was just gonna add one more thing. So as I mentioned before, the six of us, some of us were skeptical and not in favor of filling the position, which would result in a firing of a person or keeping the person in the library and keeping the library budget higher. We all came together with the promise from Mark of a job description so that we would understand and see the defined role. Also to define the lack of capacity in his office, and those items would probably come to our personnel subcommittee as a promise from Mark to find a better way to do economic development for the town. Whether it comes to fruition or not, we don't know, but what we have today is disjointed. We can't go out and hire a full-time economic development director. If we could, that would be great. We can't. And this was the way Mark proposed it to our board, that he would handle this opportunity to use this person. So that's all I'll say on that, and you can take it where you need to take it.
Just on the library, we also heard from a number of emails that we received that materials cost was reduced by 22,000, I think.
Just over 23,000.
23,000. And is that sustainable or is that gonna come back?
That is not sustainable. I think it was when you were first select person, the material budget had not been increased, and I wanna say like 15 years. And that year we came to the Board of Selectmen and asked for a substantial increase because it's a line that you need to increase year over year, so you're not looking at these cliffs, right? Materials costs go up every year. So having a cut of $23,000, not only does it impact what we can offer the community in the short term, it impacts the collection over the longer term because we're going to make harder decisions about what we need to purchase. And so the collection will not have the same breadth and depth that it could have if we had funding that I think is essential to offer the community what it needs. What else do I wanna say? The wait times will be longer. That's true. The wait times for digital content will be longer. The wait times for print content will be longer. I think Diana talked very eloquently about how, and Stephanie did as well, how the library supports the school district, not with textbooks, but with curriculum support. And that's not just print content, that's digital content. So having a cut to the budget with costs going up is actually kind of like a double cut, because you're not going to be able to afford as much anyway, even if you had flat funding. And then when you cut the budget, it's almost like a double cut.
Thank you. on to other topics. If we're ready to move on.
Yeah. I'm going to apologize to everybody about raising this issue because this is my fifth budget, and when I joined the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, excuse me, the first thing that was explained to me was the CNR budget line and the CNR payback. And this is, as I said, my fifth budget. I still can't explain what's going on. So your heads are gonna pound, but as I understand the proposal, so to make it clear, the way the system was set up to deal with recurring small capital expenditures was that a fund was created which would lend money to the town, even though it was a town-owned fund. And each year, essentially 80% of the expenditures for these recurring small capital expenditures are characterized as a loan repayment. You are proposing as part of you've proposed to change that methodology as part of a broader change, which I think everybody on this board completely endorses, which is to use to the greatest extent possible year-over-year revenues to fund recurring capital expenditures. I'm with you there. One issue we have, which I know you're addressing, Mark, but haven't yet come to be able to answer, is the question of what documents created this system so that we know if we want to implement the change, we're not violating any legal obligations that were created by past resolutions. So we'll put that to one side. My question is, how does it work? In your budget message, you say, okay, we're essentially, I don't think you used that same language. You didn't say we're gonna forgive the loans, but we're essentially not going to repay the money that was essentially created to pay for these expenses. So if we're not doing that, where's that money going? I mean, that means we would have an extra several $100,000 to spend, and where's it going and why isn't that creating a cliff?
Thank you for the question, Bert. I'll try to keep these brief. It was not alone. It is not alone. It was never alone. The chargeback system, for lack of a better word, that we refer to as the CNR model, was pre-funded with cash. The research that we've been doing to get to the heart of some of your questions and concern about how it was formed and what created it have led us on a meandering path through town history over 50 years. And just today, we found reference to CNR going back to the 1970s, which even we had no idea. We found some minutes of a Board of Finance meeting from 1993. We found some references to various things that are pointing us in a direction where I think we'll be able to get what you've asked for. And what we've seen so far is that going as far back as 1993 in some of the discussions in the minutes that we've looked at, there was an understanding that CNR was going to be funded and could be funded by either what was originally a 3-year payback. We didn't know this either until recently, a 3-year payback model. Some years after that was created, it was increased to become the 5-year model, which it is to this day. And there have been no other changes to it since about the mid-90s when it became the so-called 5-year payback. Because we've referred to it as the 5-year payback, I think there's been an assumption on the part of some that it was a loan, and it is not a loan. It is not an inter-fund loan. It's not anything that is an obligation of the town. The fund has no bonding, no borrowing, no legal requirements. All we did was instead of saying in the operating budget that we're gonna buy a lawnmower, a snow plow, whatever, fill in the blanks, we took all of those small capital, created CNR, and said, we're gonna fund CNR with an operating transfer every year. And you see it in operating transfers for 416,250 on the town side and 550 on the Board of Ed side, where it's been for many years. And we're not proposing to increase it. As I said in my budget message, we had that conversation previously with the Board of Finance. But it's interesting, when we read the minutes from 1993, there was an understanding among some of the members of the board at that time that funding it from reserves was not sustainable. And in fact, one member said, and we'll share with you all of these documents as we can compile them in chronological order, but quickly, the realization was that it is not sustainable to continue to fund it with reserves. The whole point, even back to Mike Long, who was on the Board of Finance and made comments about this at the time, you need to get it into operating so that it's absorbed gradually, their word, gradually, over some number of years, so as to have a limited impact on the mill rate. If you take CNR and just move it all into operating, the mill rate increase is off the charts. Even then, 30 years ago, they said, we've got to fund it. So what their plan was to use capital reserves at the rate of $100,000 a year over the course of the first 3-year payback to mitigate the impact on the mill rate as they sought to put small capital directly into operating. A little bit of history, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but to your question specifically, Bert, we are, I think, all in agreement that the operating budget needs to absorb the items that are recurring and should not be by definition in the CNR fund. Over the years, as I looked back on the town's use of CNR, there were often things in there that were recurring. It was also, I hate to say it, in all respect to our department heads, it was sometimes viewed as a catch-all for things that would be nice to have, things that we want. It became viewed as a separate budget category. And so we would get requests for CIP, we'd get operating requests, and we'd get CNR requests as if there were 3 different pools of money. Operating funded by taxation, CIP generally by bonding and grants, and CNR cash reserves. And so if there's money in there, let's ask for what it was. To the chair's point, we're actually spending less than $416,250 this year. It's one of the reasons that the mill rate as proposed by the Board of Selectmen is coming in at 2.15. And I don't want to signal that we'll always be able to do that. But it is not a cliff to gradually take strategically small capital and move it to operating. It's really, it makes good sense. We are funding it in 2 ways. $416,250 every year, which is pre-funded, and the rest is coming from capital reserves. Where does the capital reserves come from? It comes from the surplus from the prior year. And here is the rub, and I don't want to repeat myself too often, but we are working ourselves out of that surplus. And Bert, I'll pause there.
Yeah, but as you say, 416 was pre-funded.
Correct.
And so the line item in the budget was an operational transfer
to CNR.
But what are we doing with that pre-funded amount?
The 416
of 416.
It would go to fund it would go to fund the projects or the purchases that were in CNR. So
which was already happening.
So the finance director is simply going to pay them off. It's just a transfer, whatever the projects are. I would let Amy speak to that, but there is no interfund loan. That is the most important thing. And Chair, I don't want to.
Yeah, so I would just say, I did have the opportunity to speak with Rob Hagney and Paul Hinault and Mike Long about this. All 3 of them are very intimate. I know Melissa's likely spoken with Sean Kimball. So the way it was described to me, which may be wrong because we haven't looked at the founding documents, but that it actually was an interfund loan, because the way it worked was you buy these projects, but we're only going to charge for each project list, which is why if you look at 2008, the referendum notice, you'll see the different charges over time. When you buy the product, the general fund is only being charged 1/5 of that. And then over the next few years, you have to use taxes to pay off, whether you call it a loan or the payback, but is the equivalent of a loan. And then what happens is next year, that becomes the revenue that supports the corpus. So the corpus is just a Latin term for body. So the corpus is only partially funded because it's anticipating future revenues. And the reason why that was set up, according to the people I've spoken to, was to prevent cutting of capital in the operating budget. Because if you cut that line item, to Bert's point, 4/5 of it was payback and only 1/5 was new projects. You have to pay back what you owe to the corpus. So the whole idea was to prevent it, and yet in this budget, we're doing the exact opposite. We're cutting capital in the operating budget. So we're going sort of counter to the way it was set up. Now, we do need to see the documents, I agree with Mark, to see what the original structure is, and maybe we need to unravel it. But Letha actually wrote her PhD dissertation on just this. So I do want to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Yeah. So part of my dissertation was on this. The dissertation is on asymmetries in debt contracts, which means that it's exactly what's happening right now. So we don't know certain portions of it. You know certain portions of it. There are some people who know something else, and we're all trying to piece this together. And that's what we're all trying to do at this point. And my concern is based on the research that I did, is that something unanticipated that none of us knew about happens, and the auditor picks up on it, and we have to unravel it, and that's going to be expensive to the town. In the corporate setting, the company blows up. Here, we cannot afford to have that here. So I think your idea needs to be given a lot of thought because there is merit to it. We need to make sure that we understand how this works, and because we have too many, we don't have all of the jigsaw puzzles to make an informed decision on it. That perhaps this would be another methodology that we can look at in the future once we understand it. And I'm just defending my dissertation again by telling you I'm just telling you what that is. It's also something that the bond rating agencies look at very closely because they got burnt on Enron, they got burnt on the housing crisis, and on structured securities. And so that's something that they look at quite closely. And we've got this AAA that our collective ancestors worked so hard to get us, and so we just want to make sure that it's all
very good points. And we did reach out to the auditors who have opined that there's no issues. I'd defer to the finance director on that, and so certainly we want to make sure that we've got all the answers to the
right. Yeah. So I just give you a small note on the auditors, and thank you for doing that because that's a huge source of anxiety for me. What are the auditors going to say? What can also happen is that as they do next year's audit, let's just say you put this in place and they do next year's audit, they're going to want supporting documentation to see what the change was and what the original So we need to do all of that work ahead of time because you don't want a qualified audit after all these years of having unqualified audits. So that's what you want to do.
Yeah, my last point, and I'm sorry,
We'll go to Bert and then Regina.
Yeah, would just be, unlike Dr. Shivaswamy, this is, I feel mystified by this, but you've expressed a goal that I support, but I have no idea what you're doing. And until you can make me understand it, I can't go along with it.
Understood.
So that's really where we are.
And I'm happy to help put the documentation, like I'll tell you what I think could be missing. I mean, with the information that I have and with Amy, we can do that, but we've got to be really solid when we do something like that.
We look forward to those conversations.
Yeah, because with municipal finance, the CIP, the CNR, and the cash for capital, these are just very established concepts. And so if we, that does not mean that that's the right concept all the time, right? But so when we make that transition, we just need to make sure that we have supporting documentation for everything.
Can I ask a question?
Regina.
New here, I thought we didn't do complex policy changes mid-budget season. So could this discussion be something that we not change our policy on this budget cycle and do this deep dive in between? I thought that was kind of how we usually handle, for better or worse, kind of complexities coming up
That
with
is what the
policy.
Board of Finance does give us guidance, yes.
Is there a reason we don't think we could do that this one?
So Amy, the amount of money you put into just general fund is about $410, right? So it's the equivalent of the traditional payback. You could just put it back in the traditional payback. We could relook if you guys can make a compelling argument to closing it down and how you're going to secure capital in the operating budget. But I think given the 3 boards, according to Rob Hagney, 3 boards passed resolutions on this when it was originally passed. And the reason was because they wanted to make sure that capital wasn't cut in the operating budget. And here we are with this proposal and that's before us and capital's being cut. So this is, I'm not sort of understanding the direction. But in any event, I think Mark understands, and Lalitha, thank you, the documentation has to be there. Because our job is not our job doesn't deal in the world of trust. It's really documentation and verification. Do we have the documents? Have we reviewed everything we need to do to make sure that we've created a document trail?
And that's what the auditors will be looking to see for next
Right.
year. And so that's what they would be that's what they would be doing. And even in the in the for-profit world, in the corporate world, it will take multiple departments to get this ironed out before we move forward. Policy change like that. Of course, we move faster in the business world. Here, we've got to make sure that it's all it's all done. But we can do it. We can get it done.
If that's the direction the board wants, I don't want to say that that's
I mean,
where I am yet. I'd want to review it all
Right.
first.
Well,
But
what I meant to say was, if that was something that we decided to do, we can work on ensuring that it's clear for the public to see what it was and where we're going and what the steps are.
and what motions need to be made by 3 boards. 3 boards would probably need to adjust their motions or resolutions or whatever the documentation was, so.
Can I ask a question? My question would be on the recurring items that we've stuck into the CNR many times and use reserves because we didn't have capacity to meet guidance in the budget. We've moved out back and forth to make that happen. So in what Mark is doing here that I see value is moving those recurring items into the operating budget because we could meet guidance and do that and not fund it just depending on where we land every year with reserves or operating. So I do see some value in that happening, and that's something that I would look forward to keeping because it's actually putting the expenses that are recurring and not saying I can't afford it this year, so I'm gonna use reserves, which we've done that many times. It's putting them into the operating budget, so that should be part of the plan, in my opinion.
So that already is part of the Board of Finance's plan. Our guidance this year actually was, as you find recurring expenses, to the extent the mill rates permits, put it back in the operating budget. That's how the plow trucks ended up in the operating budget. That's how Lisa's computers, 15,000 ended up in the operating budget. That's how recycling ended up in the operating budget. That's how Nick, your 3 police vehicles and the admin ended up in the operating. Those were all initiatives of the Board of Finance saying these are recurring expenses, we need to work them into. So that is, what we've done is taken a step backwards. There are 2 things we've done that I think has us going in the wrong direction. Not to say I do agree with Mark, but having it in the operating budget means having it in the operating budget and funded by taxes, not by capital reserves. We've moved some capital into the operating budget funded by capital reserves. we've done a few things in this budget that's gonna make us rely on capital reserves more than we have in the past. One, we've reduced 284,000 of capital funded by taxes in the operating budget. Well, we still need that capital, so that's gonna be more pressure on capital reserves, to use capital reserves. The other thing we did, Tom Roy had to leave, but I did ask him. For many years, we treated TAR, Town Aid Road, which is about $500,000, restricted dollars for public works, and we use that only for equipment and vehicles. And so that was money that did not have to use capital reserves. It was a recurring grant, reliable grant, you get it every year. But now we are using some of that, about 200,000 for highway maintenance. So that means there are less dollars from TAR that are available for small equipment and technical CNR purchases, which means we have to rely more on capital reserves. So we have made structural changes that are forcing us to rely more on capital reserves. So I think we can take a hard look over the summer and how we can restructure that. But to move, the problem with putting more capital in the operating budget means taxes go up if you can't keep your costs in check elsewhere. So it is a perpetual dilemma. I will say it is not unique to Simsbury. Every town in America has more needs than they have resources to meet them. But over time, if we're gonna do a squadron line type project, we have to have more capital in the operating budget because you're not gonna have capacity in reserves and you're not gonna have capacity in borrowing. So they're totally related, and in this budget, we've taken a step backwards. I understand why you did it, totally. You were trying to meet your numbers. This is very typical in what happens with municipal budgeting when resources are tight. I get that, but I do wanna point out that it is taking us away from the goal that we had hoped to get to. We were trying, we put out new metrics. We're trying to monitor how much in taxes we pay in the operating budget each year and slowly get that up. Ideally, you wanna get your core expenses like electricity, oil, what you pay every year in your operating budget. So we have a core amount we spend on capital every year, that should be funded by taxes. When you have variance, that's when you can use reserves or borrowing and stuff like that. What that number is, we don't know exactly, but we can say that we spent 1.5 million in taxes last year if you include the Board of Ed traditional payback, the town's traditional payback, and the operation transfers, which are the recurring capital, the police vehicles, the police admin. This year it's down to about 1 million. If you include the Board of Ed. So we're kind of going in the wrong direction. We used to spend TAR 500,000 every year for capital. Now we've reduced that to about 250 because some of that's going to highways. So I think it would be advisable for us over the summer to take a hard look at how we're doing capital and come up with some targets that we would like to pursue. We do have goals to move more in, but maybe we need to be more specific and say we will do this and adjust your operating budgets accordingly. That's just one of your expenses. That will be part of the mill rate calculation. So that's one thing we can do.
Seems to be recognized.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I do have to disagree with a number of things and very respectfully just point out that, our research so far, 8 days of looking at records, shows nothing done by the Board of Selectmen years ago or by the Board of Education. The only thing we can find is minutes from various Board of Finance meetings about this. And what came up again in that research was, and I won't bore you with quoting this, but one of the members of the Board of Finance criticized the CNR process as being overly political. Another one said that it wasn't applied consistently over the years. Several, over the course of about 15 years of review, at least as far as we can see, were making the point that all of the small capital needed to be in operating at some point, and that the town, even 30 years ago, needed to wean itself off of the use of reserves in favor of having it right-sized in the operating budget. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here today. I was struck, Chair, by the fact that the more things change, the more things stay the same, and that In fact, previous boards had the same conversations years ago that we are having now. To Regina's question about why this can't be done in the off season, we had previously twice before the two new members joined the board, each budget year we've brought it to this board's attention that the 416,250 payback, 5-year payback was underfunded and that it was forcing us to use more in reserves. And in each of those 2 years, the Board of Finance released $700,000-800,000 or more in reserves to supplement the 416,250. So the 416,250 payback had always been, at least as long as I've been here, supplemented by the use of reserves. What I disagree with you about, respectfully, Chair, is that far from going in the wrong direction, what we're trying to do is, as they tried to do, put it all into operating. And the reason for that is very clear. We are not going to have capital reserves in the future for 3 reasons, and I'll end with these. Number 1, we have a reval coming in 2 years, which is the mountain that I was referring to earlier. This is much worse than a cliff. This is going to shift seismically the property value grand list from commercial, vacant commercial, to residential, forcing a mill rate increase 24 months from now, the likes of which we haven't seen. I'm very concerned, as I know you are. That's number 1. I think the second reason that we really need to do this now is that if you don't do it gradually, you will never be able to do it. This was what prior boards wrestled with, that you've got to have a multi-year plan to do it. To the question again, and I want to end with this, why not do it off cycle? We not only tried that, we tried for my first budget. The answer was no. We're not going to increase the 416,250. The minutes from these board meetings show that when it was a 3-year payback, it was only a matter of a decade before it was increased to a 5-year payback. But yet over the ensuing 30 years, it's never once been increased. The second budget I did for the town also made the pitch to the Board of Finance. This is not sustainable and we need to increase it if the model is going to work. And the answer, if I could finish, Chair, the answer was no. So for the benefit of the new members joining the board, I just want to put that history out there that we have been trying to address this. And finally, last year, we were told if you're going to make a request to increase it, you need to come to us off cycle. And we are not making a request to increase it. We're making a request to unwind it and end it, because whether it's 416,250 or 559.90 or whatever number, it would need to be reviewed. As Mike Long said in the minutes 30 years ago, this needs to be adjusted periodically, and it could be, and yet it wasn't. And so we are respectfully, Chair, driving the conversation. Now I'm happy to get Bert with you and give you all that documentation.
Just to be clear,
yeah,
in your first year, the request wasn't simply to increase the amount, because now you're saying it's not a payback or a loan. The request, as I understood it 2 years ago, was let's increase the amount without funding it, pre-funding it. And that was what this board objected to. Nobody had a problem with paying more for capital expenditures. So just to be clear, if I'm wrong, then we misunderstood each other. And I'm telling you what the rest of my board, that my colleagues who are no longer here, understood the request to be.
So we don't need to go backwards, but the point is, the traditional payback is paid for by taxes. So that's $400 paid by taxes. We have added computers and software, that's about $300,000 in the budget. We've added $500 operating thing. It is not the only way to pay for capital with taxes. You can put it in line items, there are many ways. It was just one funding mechanism. The key is to get more capital funded by taxes. This budget does not. It does less capital funded by taxes. So I agree with you, we need to get to more capital funded by taxes. I think if we can wait, at this point, I think there's consensus, we don't have sufficient documentation to make the change. Our job is not to say yes or no based on good intentions, which I believe there are, but to say, do we have the documentation and the information before us, and we do not. So for us, it's a very simple conversation, we are willing to talk with you about that and, get, as we work with Lalitha to get that documentation.
Yeah, can we commit that this will be the year we do this and get the documentation together and understand
We'll send it to you within the week, Lalitha. It's not a problem. We've been working on it day and night. And again, because it's not a loan, it's just a transfer. It is
But
we don't see it.
Well, let's see what
Yeah.
they have to say. Let's see what comes out.
Sure.
I'm just saying, in this conversation, we talked about something that UConn gave someone a PhD for, Enron and Mike Long and the 90s. And it just seems like combined together, we do have, whether it's a good or a bad idea, a fairly complicated idea. I thought we didn't do those during budget season because they require some time and some thought, people's good intentions and documentation. So unless there's some really compelling need that we have to go against, just that, not specific to the CNR, but do we or do we not make policy changes in how we handle big pieces of the budget during budget season? It seems like that should answer if we go and do this year. So far, I'm not seeing a reason to do that.
Well, we don't have to answer that tonight.
Well, let's see what you've got, and then we can make that decision. If it's going to be nothing, then we know the answer. If it's going to be significant, we know the answer. If it's going to be significant enough, we know the answer. So at this point, we don't know enough to be able to opine on it, is what we have.
I will say this is the budget presentation, we have no documentation, so we're starting behind. So we will give you, we'll take a look at what you have, if you can get that to us within the next week.
Yeah, that would be that'd be good. We can take a look at it and see what.
Okay, so moving on, capital reserves, I think sort of dovetails into this. Amy did a great spreadsheet on capital reserves. Amy, could you pull up that spreadsheet? Which one? The one where you did the revenues coming in and expenditures going out based on the CIP.
Hold on, I have to switch.
Cause this goes into, what's sustainable and how long do we have to solve this problem? I think you had a capital reserve fund, Board of Finance requested scenario.
Yeah, I just don't have it on the Zoom laptop.
The question I'm gonna have for you, Mark, is, what is the plan for the balance of the capital reserve fund? Based on the CIP Amy put together, we asked her to assume that there'll be an annual $700,000 contribution with year-end surplus, conservative amount. And that to plug in the CIP use of capital reserves, all use of capital reserves that you're planning on. And in that scenario, we started about, 4.9, and 5 years later, can you go down all the way to the bottom? We end at about 4 million. So there's 4 million we can draw on. If you decided, there are a couple of things you could do with that. 4 million, we've got squadron coming, you could just use 3 million of it and reduce the amount of squadron. You could use it for other capital projects that don't have a funding source, or because we have this capital need that we're trying to solve for, you could take an additional 700,000 out each year. We talk about how capital reserves are unreliable. Well, this is now reliable. You spend 700,000 down each year, you've got 6 years before that comes down to zero. So that's one thing. I guess we'd ask you to sort of think about what is the plan for that? And it's gonna depend on what we do with Squadron in part. And whether those dollars are needed there, but it doesn't make sense to leave 4 million there. If we don't have a plan, let's just not bond the full 5 million this year. To me, it does make sense to use it towards capital reserves. You could do an additional $700,000 now and draw that down unless this is needed for something else. So my question is, are you holding that in reserve for something else?
So I appreciate the question, Sharon. Really, I would defer to the board on this one because all we were doing on the budget team was trying to wean ourselves off of the use of capital reserves to support capital CNR. And I think this demonstrates that we're not putting up here on the board a declining use of reserves even as we phase out CNR under the proposal we just finished talking about. I think it's very important to come back to the point that I was making with Bert earlier, and that is that the reserves are fed by year-end surpluses, which we expect to disappear other than the 700,000 that Amy's presenting here. That for the sake of the public is coming from an underestimation of the tax collection rate, and no problem with that. That is a great budgeting practice. It virtually assures us a relatively small surplus every year. And so that isn't really the point I'm making. But I think that what this demonstrates is that we don't want to have a continuing reliance on reserves. And that is fundamental to what I think I'm recommending for the foreseeable future. Every year that we see a surplus in the multi-million-dollar range, it is my view that we raise the mill rate too much. And some of the surpluses over the years have been unexpected and nobody could have guessed that they would happen, and that is true. And I mean no criticism, but what I do want to point out to the board is that it doesn't change the fact that year after year in recent years, we continue to come in with surpluses. In our research that we were conducting, we found that the board was critical of the former town manager, Maria Capriola, for having surpluses. And the irony is that those surpluses have only increased. We need to get a handle on it, which was why we tried to address the police vacancy factor as well. It wasn't just to keep our expense side down. It was to mitigate a surplus coming from what we all know is an inability to hire the police officers as quickly as we'd like to. So my answer to your question, Chair, is that we have no plan. And in fact, we leave it to this board to maybe use those reserves for Squadron, or for some as yet unexpected expense, or for mill rate relief, or for any number of things. We don't rule out your offer. I think I'm interpreting you as perhaps being willing to raise the 5-year payback and keep the CNR model at a higher funded level, and we'd be happy to have those conversations again. But we have no plan to use the reserves. We're just demonstrating that that's 700,000, and I would say it's 880. I always defer to the finance director on this, but that's a conservative estimate, I think. And I don't know, Amy, if you have anything to add on this. I don't want to speak for you, but I know I'm not looking to use reserves because I believe to my core that we should not be turning in multi-million-dollar surpluses every year. That's just my opinion.
Absolutely. Mark, I know we get surplus, the revenue recommendations from you. What would you do differently?
We've been very reluctant to increase our revenue estimates, and I've put my toe in the water twice. Last year, we raised the building permit fees with the support of the Board of Selectmen and still came in over that. In fact, the Board of Selectmen doubled our request, if I remember last year. So we've experimented with this. This year, we're asking to increase the conveyance tax by 30,000. That's a de minimis number. My own view, and it's just my view, is that we were underestimating investment income, but I defer to the experts on this. But what I'm saying to you, Chair, is with all due respect, and I've said this to my first selectman, the question has to be, how much of a surplus are you willing to come in with at the end of the fiscal year after we raise the mill rate even 2.15, right? That's the question.
Yeah, so the question we have, and I think you raise a good one, and expenditures can be budgeted objectively. You have more control over that. You should try and get it right. I agree with you 100%. In getting it right, don't create a cliff for future years. On the revenue side, it's a dark cloud.
It's a dark cloud.
For anyone who's playing finance bingo at home, I did say that. And there are people playing bingo right now. What that means is some revenues you cannot budget for. For instance, we had Amy, our finance director, call OPM at one point and said, "Are we gonna get the state grant?" And they said, "No, you are not getting the state grant. Do not budget it." And then what happened? 6 months later, we got the state grant. You cannot budget that better. Sometimes building permits, a developer doesn't always tell us what they're gonna do, and they'll come in with a project that was not anticipated. You cannot budget for that. Or they'll tell you that I'm gonna do this, I promise I'm gonna do this. Do you rely on that promise when the economic conditions change and the revenue is uncertain? We've had developers say they're gonna come in and do it and then they don't come in. Do you budget that? That's not prudent budgeting. A base budgeting is. The other thing is interest income. That's just happened across the state. When we pick our budget numbers, you have to do it 18 months in advance of what the economy is gonna look like. There was a spike in interest rates. Do you budget what Lisa thinks? No. Do you budget what Mark thinks? No. We consult with our professional advisors who has broad knowledge of the economy and get professional advice, and that's what we budget. So the question is, are there things we can do to change it? Now, right now, in talking with Bob Hagney, right now we've gone through a huge amount of surplus because the state has had a lot of revenue and they've been generous and have thrown it back to us. But there were days, and I was there with Malloy and Rob Hagney was there, and I don't remember who the governor, where the state cut because there weren't enough. So it goes in these cycles, and it's true, we are in a cycle of a large surplus, and Mark is correct, we expect that to come down. Which means while this is happening, we need to get more paid for with taxes in the operating budget. Whether you call it line item, whether you call it traditional payback, that's all taxes, just taxes, and we need to move that way. Right now, we are spending less on taxes than we did last year. That's the problem we're trying to solve. Here, we've got a way to get to Mark's goal over time. We don't have to figure it out overnight because we can draw that down. If we really don't have a plan for it, our actuary said, put it into the police pension. That's another option we have. We're bonding 5 million, we could bond 3 million this year or 2 million and get our debt service down and build in cash for capacity. What we need from staff, I think, is to come up with a plan on how you'd like to spend that money down. It's not our job, obviously, to do your job. We'd like to know how you envision using this pocket of money that we have to best effect to accomplish our goals. So that's something to think about, and we can work that out over the summer and have joint conversations about the best way to do that. And the answer may take care of itself with Squadron.
One thing I'd say about the surpluses, because I agree with you in principle, we don't want enormous surpluses, and I've heard members of the Board of Finance, past members of the Board of Finance, rail against overtaxation. We have one policy as a board that pretty consistently, but not always, generates surpluses. That is the 98.5% tax collection assumption. There's a good reason for that, in my opinion, and that is because while we want to make revenues and expenditures as close as possible in our budgeting process, we always want to make revenues higher. We have a legal obligation to have a balanced budget, and we want our bond rating agencies to continue to give us a AAA rating. So it's prudent to have this assumption, which generally gives us at least this cushion of around $700,000. I am not aware of another policy of the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen that consistently generates surpluses. If you can identify one, then let us have it, because I don't know of anything else. I know we've had surpluses over the last year, and Lisa went over a few of the causes. We had surpluses because of unexpected vacancies or vacancy rates that weren't properly budgeted for. we've had them because of unexpected grants that one can't budget for, but I don't know of any policies that we're following that are causing these budget surpluses. So if you can identify them, I'll back you up 100%.
The only one we identified clearly was the underestimation of the vacancy rate. So even before we spiked out police, it was my view in year two, Bert, that the vacancy rate was underestimated. And so in year two, we increased it globally slightly. It was still low. And then the next step is to pull out the police and try to adjust it there. But the vacancy rate is one I would point to right off the top of my head. But your point's well taken. Absolutely. And we agree on the tax collection rate now after much discussion. I think that when you've got it baked in properly, but you've raised the mill rate and you still have a $4.9 million surplus, it's those things together that we find my word is concerning.
Well, so the question is, what do you do with that? You can't plan for the surplus. It came, it doesn't happen all the time. It's cyclical. We are in a period, we know with
Really good question.
crisis and a war, it's gonna go away. So the question is, what do you do with it? And the state of Connecticut actually tells you what to do with it. They, as most states do, they passed a law that said any town with a AAA bond rating is gonna have surplus, because that's how you keep your AAA bond rating. And don't waste it. So if you get this surplus, you can put it in a capital reserve fund, not the CNR payback, just a capital reserve fund. And it sits there until the next budget cycle. And at that point, you budget it transparently and let the public decide how to use that money. Why don't you budget it on time? Guess when you get the surplus? Only after it's been certified after the audit, and that's done in October or November. You can't do that transfer early. That's part of the reason why that happens. That is very typical in municipal budgeting in terms of what is the right amount of surplus the town should have, because Mark's right, you can overtax and you don't want to be in that situation. There is no universal standard, but Massachusetts has a tremendous municipal finance office, and they say you should have 3 to 5%. Our board has pretty much said between 1 and 3%. So what is reasonable? Think about your own budget. You don't want to budget too close to the margin, because if you miss your number, you risk your AAA bond rating, borrowing costs go up. If it's too high, you're overtaxing. So we generally, our board says if we're over 2%, we go back and look at our assumptions like Mark did with the conveyance or building fees. Those are not big numbers, and say, could we have done anything to reduce it? No, we couldn't have predicted the grant. No, we couldn't have predicted this one-time permitting fee. No, we couldn't have predicted the spike in interest rates. So then you don't adjust because it just happened. It's coincidental. But we do look at that. And I think the 4 million is something we all need to give thought to, because that's a resource that could be used to reduce debt service. It could be reduced to smooth in the tiny capital that we have over the years, spending $700,000 a year. That gives you consistent spending. So I would put that out there. Or for a one-time project, I mean, we could fund the high school project out of cash. We don't have to borrow for that. We see that right there. There's no plan for it otherwise. We're not using it for Squadron. Squadron is, who knows,
It's a few
right?
years away.
So those are things we can think about. All right, so we've got that. Moving on, we've done vacancy rate, we've got the budget gaps, payback. Salaries and benefits. Bert, did you wanna ask about that, sort of where we are in projections?
Yeah, well, this goes again to the question of what we're setting ourselves up for in future years. So you know, I think you actually stepped out of the room when I asked Matt about the labor contracts for the Board of Education. So we recently signed 3-year contracts. He said, and the year-over-year expense or cost of those contracts, he said, was gonna go up 2.8% each of the next 3 years. We've got your contracts here. I see that the basic pay categories which are on these grids for each year, go up by 2.5% a year. But there are also guaranteed step increases. So have we estimated the year over year increase in the cost of these contracts?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Can you provide us with that information?
We can give you a breakdown of that. I think through the collective bargaining process, we've been very aware of the impact of step increases and the challenges that give us in terms of doing fiscal impact statements. And I don't have the union contracts in front of me. One of them, I know we made a point of negotiating a reduction in the number of steps from I think 22 down to 9. This was a union, I forget which one, my apologies, we've got a number of them, where in addition to the GWI, the general wage increase approved by the boards as part of the budget, every member of that bargaining group was getting at least one step, in some cases 2. And those step increases are a big part of what caused the jump. And so as I think was said earlier, anything that you want to accomplish by collective bargaining does take cycles and years to do it. And so every time you're in the bargaining room, you want to do that. I know that with respect to one of our very powerful unions, we were able to, while we gave some decent wage increases, we were able on the other side of that equation to limit the amount of time they could be out on injury on our dime, which at the time was forever. And we reduced that to 18 months. There was a number of things on the other side of the equation, Bert. I think when you look at to your question specifically, why isn't that percentage increase 2.8 like it is at the board? A, it's because we have steps. And B, it's because there's other things in the GWIs that might have made them more impactful. The most important one was the rollout of our classification study that the boards had approved back in 23, 24. And this is where some members of collective bargaining groups got wage increases that were what we call market adjustments, which had not been done in the town for a number of years. So
I know there's half a dozen contracts and they are
complicated, yeah.
But I would like to know, in the broader context of our talking about possible cliffs, et cetera, that we have some sense of whether there are significant looming increases in the cost of labor.
And we can get you that. The one thing I will say is that we're up to date with all of our collective bargaining agreements, and they're all we're good for the next 3 years. So what we do have is clarity among all of our collective bargaining groups, which I think that helps the budgeting process. Might not help the bottom line, but we know what it is, so we can share that information.
I don't have clarity yet, but
Mark, so we got the fixed costs from Amy, and town side fixed cost salaries was 6% and Board of Ed was 279. So the question is that gonna continue at that level?
No.
And you have that information, I assume you've talked with your actuaries, that would be great if we could just get a copy of it.
And
Then we
again,
can do
Chair,
3-year
that
projections.
number includes the one-time market adjustment.
Great. So next year, you expect that to be a lower increase, even though
We expect it to be off the top of my head about 3.6 with the step increases, and we can get you the exact detail on that. But
the dollar amount, not the percents, that would be great.
Sure.
I'd like the percent.
And both, actually, okay.
We're happy to do that, Chair. It's in.
Do you still get actuarial evaluations of the
Not on the
contracts?
salaries, no, but on obviously on other things, we've gone to the actuary for for fiscal impacts of other changes in the collective bargaining, like for the police pension. Part of that negotiation was to for the first time, police officers have a retirement, a disability retirement
That's okay.
benefit, right?
We're just looking for percents and dollar numbers if you have it, just so that we can plan out the other stuff, that'd be great. Okay, so
Just on salaries though, Chair, right?
No, salaries and steps.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, the impact, yeah.
Is there anything else other than salaries that we should be aware of that could create a fiscal cliff?
No, we're very cognizant, as the superintendent is on his side, about cliffs. We're not, no. And even our use of capital reserves in the operating budget, in as we talked about with CNR, no cliffs.
We're not looking to be in the belly of the beast like you
No.
are, but we just want to know at a high level, yeah.
Just we'll go quickly, two things. A lot of the capital project sheets do not have start and completion dates or operating costs. Some of them, I wouldn't assume they have operating costs, but if we could get projected start completion dates, that would be
CIP.
great. Yeah, just the large ones, yes. Obviously, the equipment, those are only annual appropriations, we don't need that. Lilith, I think we have one question left on revenue anticipation bonds and the golf course. We're having the first allocation from that project this year, so.
Do you know anything about the structure of those bonds? Or is it too early to be talking about?
I think it's too early. I'd defer to the finance director on that. I have no information about the use of RANs, as far as I know.
Yeah, no, that was like in the out plan, so we would have to have Barry come in and talk through it.
Yeah.
Has the town ever done those in the past?
I've done them, not here, no.
It's creative thinking outside the box for down the line to get this done.
Revenue bonds, are these revenue bonds or revenue?
We would use the surcharge that we're collecting at the golf course to pay back the bond cost. So we would use fund balance, if when we get to that point, the first allocation is just minor renovations this year at the farms. But as we build up that fund balance, we've already got a positive fund balance that we're putting toward that project. We're allocating, what is it, $1 million right now, Amy? And we're setting aside toward that future project. Over the next few years, we'll be adding to that pot with the annual surcharge on the greens fees that we have, so $4 on an 18.
Where did we get the $1 million from?
We've golf.
10 years.
In the it's over.
That's the reserve?
It's been built up through.
Fund balance?
Yeah.
So this is the first time we're hearing about that purpose of that.
No, it's been identified in the plan for a couple of years and also talked about. It was the pavilion at first and it was moving over. It's been.
I didn't realize the fund balance was to be used for that.
I mean, it's allocated toward cart path and drainage repairs. That money's been already allocated. Bunkers is in there. All of the Simsbury Farms improvements are through fund balance. We're juggling that around to fit in that, looking at 29 or 30 for the actual construction if we get to that point for that restaurant expansion.
Can we get a summary of the plan for fund balance?
I'm sorry, say what?
Could we get just a summary of your plan for fund balance?
Yeah, I mean, be happy,
I think they sent that with sewer.
What?
I think they sent that with sewer.
Yeah, it was in there.
You sent that?
I had asked for the parks one and the sewer one.
Right. I must have missed that.
Resend it.
Okay.
But the idea is that project won't cost the taxpayers anything because ultimately the bond cost, when we get to that point where we've raised enough money to get within, say, $1 million, $1.1 million, $1.2 million, somewhere in there, we bond that revenue anticipation bond and pay it back with the continued surcharge over the next.
When you say we bond that, do you mean?
I mean the town, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
What is the structure of that bond? Is it a structured security or is it
I'm not a finance person,
I think the idea was to get the project on the plan so that we're flagging it, right?
Yes,
And then the idea was to indicate that it would not be taxpayer funded at this point.
Okay.
So I don't think we've gone further than that.
Okay, so whenever, we look at it, I'm just really curious to know, what the economics of that would be, given the nature of the revenues.
Could we get a presentation over the summer on that? Just with bond counsel and our bond advisor, just since it's new to this board in any way? Okay, that'd be great. All right, are there any other questions that the board has at this point? All right, so do you have a draft of the motion to set the hearing? Does anyone have that?
Well, they just set the hearing.
Yeah, you can
You can just make a motion to set the hearing date. Do you need something in writing?
I think we need to see what it is we're approving, yeah?
I think we just set the public hearing date.
Just set the date, Chair, isn't that what you normally do for the public hearing?
So in the past, we've asked to see, I don't know, it's pretty typical.
I think normally you just set the public hearing date.
Well, there is going to be a notice that goes out on our behalf listing what the summary is. What is the summary of the budget that's gonna go out with the notice?
Oh, it would be the budget summary. But the motion itself is just the motion to set the hearing date.
Yeah,
If we could
wh-
just
what is
see
it
what's
we're
gonna go
motioning?
up.
Yeah, let's just see what we're motioning. We're almost there. Almost at the finish line.
And we didn't, Amy, I guess we'll put off your finance director's report. Is there anything new of significance that we need to be aware of?
We need to approve minutes from the last one.
We do, so.
Yeah.
Which can you pull up the agenda? I don't have some great
But they don't have to vote on it.
Yeah, budget discussion and
Literally
reviewing of the
public
minutes
hearing.
after the two presentations.
Yeah, we're supposed to review
One of
minutes,
them. That's true.
which we will do.
It's the budget summary.
this one?
Yeah.
Thank you. I know, Melissa, thank you for the clarification on the library and where those different things are. So one motion we'll need at the hearing itself is to change the budget to reflect those corrections. Cause we can't.
Corrections?
We have in the different parts of the budget that was passed by the first selectman.
Oh, the summary detail, yeah.
Those summaries will need to be fixed, but we can't do them in the interim because the Board of Selectmen, they need motions, so we'll fix them at the hearing, so it'll go out as is. So just in your list of motions, when we get to motions for
I don't
passing
know
the
that a
budget.
motion's necessary, I mean, it's showing up in the public works budget.
On the line item budget that we're gonna pass at the thing, it has buildings and grounds, it's still in the library budget, so we'll have to move that. What was passed by the Board of Selectmen? What is the budget? I mean, those have to be fixed when it gets to us, that's all, it's
Yeah,
not minor.
We'll
Yeah.
correct the presentation of it
Okay.
for sure. I don't understand what motion we need.
So the motion is for the public hearing, right, of this summary? Is this what we're doing? Is this what we're doing?
So this is what it's gonna show, it's gonna show this.
Okay.
And the top part is just, you'll see the selectmen budget, debt service and capital, which is in this case just debt service. Board of Education budget, non-public schools, total appropriations.
Is this what the public get to see?
Yes, but one question, Amy did confirm to us that we're actually using not 900,000 of capital reserves, use of reserves there, it's actually 1.6, does that need to be corrected?
So it is, it's in the it's 1.6, but the use of reserves, we had just broken it out as part of the debt service plan. And then past years when we had used capital reserves, we didn't break it out. So however you wanna present it, doesn't matter to me. We can include the 1.6 here and reduce it from the above line item, or we can just combine these two and just make it revenues for the 114.
Well, we are using, I mean, I don't know, thoughts on that? What would be
I'd
the
rather increase the 900 chair unless you have an objection.
increase the 900 to the actual number?
I
That's
would like
kind of
to
where I am too.
See it
Okay.
clearly. Because
Yeah.
our goal again is to reduce the reliance on that year over year, so I want it on the main page, I think is.
That makes sense to me. I'm comfortable with that.
I mean, the only thing is if the bond rating agency sees use of reserves.
Pardon?
The only thing is if the bond rating agency sees use of reserves.
But it's not, can we change that to use of capital reserves?
Sure.
Would that change anything with the bond rating?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's explainable either way, but I'm just saying like the use of reserves is something that they watch for.
But we are using reserves, right?
We're using capital reserves.
So just change it to use of
It just
capital
did.
reserves.
Yep.
Use of capital reserves for capital. Why'd you put that?
Well, you can if it includes the 900 for debt.
No, that's capital. That's part of
It
capital
is, they
expense.
consider that, that's great to know, good.
Well, Amy, you tell me. It's
Just your capital
paying off
slash debt.
capital.
There you go.
There we go.
That's one less phone call from the bond rating agency.
Do you think does that make you comfortable or does that leave you with worries?
I mean, I'm not worried about it. It's explainable, but.
Okay. Alright, is everyone comfortable with Art, do you have any objections?
No, no objections here.
Okay.
So then we have to reduce the number above, I assume, right, Amy?
Great.
What you see in a lot of other towns is they do have a separate line item for the capital reserve fund, CNREF, and that's essentially what we're doing there. It may require some explanation on the part of the Board of Selectmen to clarify that. Amy, do you have any concerns with any of this?
No.
Okay. Melissa, do you have any concerns with doing that? Wendy, do you have any?
No, because I'm not really sure what you're doing, so.
We're just clarifying that the amount of capital reserves, it's a marker, we're gonna try to get that down over time. It will go down next year because we don't need it for the debt service plan, so that's automatically gonna go way down.
I'm happy with this.
Alright.
I'm least unhappy with this.
Melissa, can you please state the motion you would like the board to consider?
Do you want me to print the legal notice that will go out and you can approve that, or do you wanna just?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. I just need a minute.
Just for members of the public, it's 6 o'clock at the library on the 8th, is that right?
I thought it was the seventh.
Seven.
Yeah, good. That's what I've been
At
told.
7?
Yeah.
The hearing's at 7?
No, the seventh,
Ooh.
the Tuesday. The hearing.
The 8th was the snow date.
Ah, 8 was the snow date.
8th was last year.
It's not gonna snow in April.
Okay, I'm glad I asked.
No
April
more
7th.
Not this year.
Now that you guys put that out there in the universe,
We should see.
Mother Nature has really big ears.
No, we didn't say anything.
Never say never.
It's the official name of that room, Friends
I
of
do
the.
love snow, but in the
It is in the Friends room.
I thought it was in the Jericho room.
It's not, it's in the
To
Friends
do
room.
this again.
Okay,
I'm 100% sure about that.
good, cause I don't know.
Okay.
I thought it was in Jericho.
What's it called?
The Friends of the Library Program.
Can we do the motion?
We need to see the motion.
I need to pick up Rajesh from the airport. Come.
We do need people here to do the motion, so.
Yeah.
You know, Melissa, if you can just put it on the screen, that will suffice.
What we did last year is you just basically approved the legal notice.
Just so we have for review the things we've asked for Mark, to get us a summary of the cost of the union negotiation projected over the life of the contracts, both in terms of total cost and percent. We've asked for, what else have we asked for?
The CNR
CNR
document.
information.
Right.
Both the documents and an explanation.
Yeah, a written explanation would be great.
I'm happy to help with that.
You just mentioned the labor costs.
The labor costs, we mentioned the labor costs. Oh, and the capital projects, we need projected start and end dates and operating costs. Sorry, if any.
Chair, I circulated a more thorough memo earlier today on the vacancy factor. If you could keep that open mind on that.
I came in after I was here, so I
I know.
haven't had a chance to read it.
No, just so you know, it's in your
I
inbox.
saw it, yeah,
Thank you.
I saw it. Looking forward to reading it.
And we gave you the COC report too, Chair, you'd asked for last month.
The which report?
From, the assessment.
Oh, wonderful, thank you.
You're very welcome.
What's the takeaway there?
It's bad. And worse after the next revow, so.
Okay, so that will explain, you know, when we think, why isn't the grand list growing, now we know part of the reason, right?
Right.
Those are jarring.
I know, it's
That was kind of scary.
no, it happens every time that way. The key is to make sure your fingers don't get in the way.
Or can you just read that?
Yeah.
Since it has my name on it, we should make sure it's right.
The second date is 21st.
What's that, if it's continued?
And then after that,
The last bit, is it?
Looks good.
Okay, are you sure? The last, and any other business proper?
Yeah, you're worried about that comment, it's correct.
yeah, we do, there will likely, oftentimes there's town business to take care of that we
Alright.
take care of as well.
Okay, got it, okay,
Okay.
understood.
All right, so Melissa, can you state the motion so that I'm just too tired to
Oh,
do it?
sure.
What would the motion be?
So the motion would be to approve the public hearing notice, to set the public hearing on Tuesday, April 7th, 2026 at 6 p.m.
I just add to that, let the minutes reflecting as attached. So we can include that in our minutes. And
So
Amy,
moved.
Second.
all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I would ask, alright, I would ask for another motion, Amy, could we please make sure that as we get budget emails, that those be included in our minutes?
We need to approve minutes.
Third motion, I have a motion to approve the minutes in our,
From the previous,
yes, we could,
what does it say?
it's late.
February 17,
Do
2026
people need
regular
time
meeting
to read
minutes.
them?
Aye.
Okay,
I'm gonna
No.
abstain anyway, I wasn't there.
okay,
No, I've read it, I'm good. There's
Okay.
one typo, but it's okay, I'm
all
let
right.
it
May I
go.
have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We did
One
not,
abstention.
Art,
and one abstention.
And Art,
Art, are you on the motion, on the minutes? Good?
Yes, sorry.
We did not
Aye.
get to Amy's financial report, anything significant. Mark, the
Oh,
one,
you've asked me.
all right, I'm trying to, Mark, the one question I forgot to ask, most important one, is there anything of material significance this board should be aware of that has not been disclosed to us?
In the budget?
Financial things that might come up that you're aware of that could significantly impact fund balance or operations?
and if he thinks of something subsequently.
First thing we do is notify this board.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with
I
that,
move to adjourn.
So moved.
all in favor,
Second.
please say aye.
You sure?
Thank you, everyone.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
Bringing us together through local programming,
Education and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community.
Ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings.
And celebrating milestones.
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions. And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue.
Even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open.
Continues to educate our youth and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SEM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
For generations to come.
Visit our website
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media.
Where your town,
Your schools
And your government come together.